Anybody home?
Today, I want you to open your mind.
I've almost come to the conclusion that the story is so damning that the mass of people can't deal with it.
We are in process of developing a whole series of techniques to get people actually to love their servitude.
We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
To change the minds and the attitudes and the beliefs of the people to bring about one world socialist totalitarian government.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists.
It has patterned itself after every dictator who has ever planted the ripping imprint of a boot on the pages of history since the beginning of time.
If you can get people to consent to the state of affairs in which they are living, then you have a much more easily controllable society than you would if you were relying wholly on clubs and firing squads and concentration camps.
Tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices.
As you connect the dots between different people, organizations, religions, history, suddenly the picture starts to form.
The kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men.
Someone born in the United States is not more special than someone born in Mexico. They're just vehicles for the consciousness to experience.
They do not want your children to be educated. They do not want you to think too much.
It was learned that the aliens had been and were then manipulating masses of people through secret societies, witchcraft, magic, the occult, and religion.
They reach into our children. Music, television, books.
Prey on children's innocence.
How can I disprove lies that are stamped with an official seal?
So if you have the opportunity to stand next to one of these machines, it feels like an altar to an alien god.
Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun.
The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc is now in the possession of the Army.
Too many others know what's happening out there, and no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete. A case to be filed under M for Mankind in the Twilight Zone.
It's about time some of you got acquainted with the real hard truth.
If you don't connect the dots, it's just a mass of what's all this about.
Because I'm in Japan, so it's a little bit different over here. It's actually early morning where I am, and it's late night where the majority of the audience is. A lot of things I wouldn't even hear about or I wouldn't see if it weren't for social media. If it weren't for the internet of things. Really, if it wasn't for X, I probably would not know much of what was going on in the world because I just don't see anything in the news. There's very little. Sometimes there's something on Japanese social media. Sometimes something comes across my feed, but that's pretty much it. It's mostly X, and that gives me a perspective that is very narrow in terms of the information that's available. But out of that narrow information field, I think we can put together a good show tonight. I don't have any other social media because it's worthless to put all that time and effort into things that just don't go anywhere, no matter how much time and effort you put into it. And if it does start to go somewhere, then suddenly your account gets restricted and sometimes it gets removed. So We've been around for so long, 16 years, and we've been kind of like the Travelocity gnome. We've been everywhere, man. And over those 16 years, I've learned a lot. I've made mistakes, pronounced things wrong, gotten things wrong. But there are some things that it's not really, in my assessment, about being right or wrong. It's just about looking at the story and trying to provide an objective analysis of it. I won't bore you with the same story again, but most of you know that this subject of Iran and holy war and all of it, all the stuff that goes with it, you know that we've been covering this story since long before anything happened with Iran. We've been covering this story long before Donald Trump was back in office. We were covering this framing of the eschaton, this framing of Armageddon. And we're not going to talk too much about that tonight, but of course it is an underlying theme of the show. As most of you would assume, it's important to understand what the people who are making the decisions believe, what their faith is, or what their religious doctrine is, or how they interpret it, because if you can understand that, then you can certainly understand or get an idea of the motivations behind the decisions that they're making. And I think that really is the bridge between the occult and the political or the geopolitical. You're probably watching, like I have been, prominent voices, be them on the left, be them on the right, be them in the middle, be them in the alternative, be them in paranormal, conspiracy world. You're watching people from Alex Jones to Tucker Carlson to random, quote, influencers who have suddenly realized, I don't think that they term it this way, but they've suddenly realized, oh, the occult has a lot of value in regard to understanding what's going on. You can't understand it politically. It doesn't make any sense because it's not a political issue. These are not, as much as they are, they're also equally as not political or geopolitical issues. As much as it is just standard war and business as usual, what is it good for? It's also just something that exists in the ethereal, something that you have to look below the political bickering and the propaganda to figure out that the people that are waging that war are witches gathered in black masses, if not literally, pretty close to literally. And they truly believe that they can poke God, they can nudge God, they can nudge the Creator, they can bring about the end of the world, etc. Now, I also don't think that those people necessarily think that they can literally do that. I think that they believe it is about the optics and getting those 4 billion people who do believe in the literalisms of the end times to believe that that's what's happening. So tonight on the show, we have a list of comments from the president. We have news clips. We also have some interesting news articles. Do you remember, not too long ago, there was this crazy thing happening in a place called Gaza? And remember how we were told that it started in 2023? And I just, for the life of me, I could have sworn it started decades before that. I could have sworn it started over half a century before that, but what do I know, right? And when we learned about what was happening in Gaza, and we were told that it was happening only as of 2023, we were told that there was a peace deal that was worked out. A peace deal. There's peace. And that's one of the things that, there's peace in the Middle East. This really wasn't that long ago. This was hopefully within memory. This was in the fall of last year. This wasn't long ago. And we were told that there's this grand peace deal that's been worked out. And Kushner, Jared Kushner, who's not a demon, not a snake, he's a wonderful guy. Jared Kushner helped to get this peace deal. The president took credit for it, and he should get a Nobel Prize. It's all about peace. And then we learned that Israel actually was not a signatory to the agreement. It was an agreement between the U.S. and Egypt and some other parties. And within hours, I mean, really, it might have been within minutes, at least in terms of the availability of information, we started hearing that the ceasefire and the peace deal, which there is a difference between those two things, the ceasefire and the peace deal was broken in Gaza. And of course, immediately, oh, the Palestinians did it, the Arabs did it, the Muslims did it. You can't trust a Muslim. You can't trust an Arab. You can't trust these brown people. That's what the Israeli and the American media were telling us. There's no guilt on the part of the Israelis. And then we learned the Israelis actually did some shooting. They fired some weapons. And then we found out that one of the things that blew up that was supposed to be a Arab act of terrorism turned out to be Israeli. And it turned out that the Israelis were indiscriminately just firing into the void in areas that prior to the peace deal, the so-called terrorists had openly stated, like, we don't even work in, we don't have anybody in those areas. And that had been well known. So the Israelis were just firing in, I guess, to empty buildings. They must have seen a kid who had survived the bombing. They had to take him out so they didn't grow up to be a terrorist. But remember all that? And remember how it was framed as all the MAGA conservative neocons. Remember how they framed that? They framed it as, you said the president couldn't get it done. You said the president was a warmonger. You said the president was supporting genocide. Well, he got peace. I bet you feel stupid now. And I remember going to bed, and I don't know what the time difference was, but I remember going to bed, waking up, and by the time I woke up the next morning, it was official. The peace was over. And yet, for some reason, to this day, months later, that is still being promoted as a peace deal in Gaza. But there is no peace agreement. It's a fake peace deal. It's not real. It's not Israel. It's not real. So it was fake. And all the people who tried to defend the genocide and the ongoing to this day, I guess you could call it a conflict. I call it ethnic cleansing. The people that defended that and said that it's okay, it's justified, then took the peace deal and said, well, see, we got peace, so it was all 7D chess. And then when it turned out to not be a peace deal, they shut their mouths and disappeared. And then we fast forward to today, and here we go again. It's the same exact story. I wake up, I rub my eyes, I have a cup of tea, I say a prayer at my little Shinto shrine. I do the few things that I need to do, and then, there's peace in Iran. And then I start reading the same talking points, the same script. It's just replacing Gaza with Iran. And you said the president couldn't get it done. You, all these panicans and Alex Jones, and people just didn't believe him, that he's a genius and he's drinking diet soda and playing eighth dimensional chess. And then I went to bed, and I just woke up this morning. And as soon as I woke up, it's like 5 a.m. here not right this moment, but when I woke up this morning, it's 5 a.m. Actually, before 5 a.m., it was like 4:45. I wake up and notification from a friend of mine, Israel violated ceasefire, bombed Lebanon. And then I'm pretty sure I was able to predict that, not because I'm smart. It's just because that's the playbook. And then you just have to invert the talking points. So when Laura Loomer says you can't trust a Muslim, okay. Can't trust the Iranians, okay. Well, you can't trust a Jew, can't trust the Israelis. How about that? You can't trust a Jew. You can't trust an Israeli, because all they do is violate ceasefires. In fact, I guess you could say they technically don't violate them because they never really agreed to them in the first place. They never agreed to a ceasefire in Gaza. And just like in Gaza, the Israelis never agreed to a ceasefire with Iran. The agreement was between the United States and Iran. Israel never agreed to anything. Now, maybe it was implied like, get your dogs off of us. Actually, it's more like the US or the dogs, but the Israelis, get them off of us. And then I read, I mean, it was all over the news that the peace/ceasefire 2-week agreement was actually not just like a foundation for future diplomacy, but it included Lebanon. And then Israel continued bombing Lebanon, reportedly 100 strikes in like 10 minutes. I mean, you really have to put some effort into that. And that was all our money, probably. So that's you paying for that. I'm not. I paid the Japanese government taxes. I didn't pay the U.S. government taxes. See, the Japanese people, they use it for roads and trash cleanup and maintenance and infrastructure. They're not currently using it to bomb schools. So I don't have much of an issue paying a little bit of tax to the Japanese government. Plus, the trains run on time, which is really great, and they're not dangerous. And I'm going to digress it's such an amazing thing that you can have a country like this in 2026. I didn't think it could exist. I was told by the press that it can't exist. Anyway, so that's something you paid for. And then you learned that the Israelis, once again, Benjamin Netanyahu just said, like, we're ready to keep fighting. And they never had the intention to stop because they're not really part of the peace ceasefire agreement anyway. But then the crazy thing is, the darndest thing happened. The White House said that the agreement did not involve Lebanon, even though we have the official statement from the Pakistani who negotiated the agreement. It includes Lebanon. And we were told doesn't include Lebanon. And then the Iranians had submitted a 10-point plan. And then the White House said they never did that. Or it's something we threw out, even though the president had just said it's something we considered. So it's not just that you're being lied to. It's that the lies are ridiculous. And I suppose you could interpret that in one of two ways. I think you could interpret it in the sense that, like, these people have so much power, so much control, they're so reckless, they don't care if it's so obvious that they're lying to you. And I think that is probably part of the equation. But I also think that part of the equation is they're desperate. And yes, they have an immense amount of control over every sector of society, but they're so desperate that it's just erratic. Like, to use a sports analogy, you go to I play basketball. You go to a basketball game, and you have a plan. You run some plays. Maybe the game doesn't go so well for you, so maybe you change up the defensive strategy. Maybe you go man to man instead of zone coverage. Maybe instead of running set plays, you start just kind of letting the game flow. I mean, maybe you add another set play in, a different one you haven't run for a while. You change things up a little bit. And then by the end of the game, you get to a point where, you're down to the last like 3-4 minutes. You still might have a chance. And then it turns into that, like, let's keep this going for an hour and a half, this 3 minutes, so that we can make ad revenue. And then there's like a foul, free throws, a 3-pointer attempt, fouls, free throws. And it just goes kind of on and on and on and on. But, at a point, you just start lobbing the ball up and hoping it goes in. And then every time you miss, it's like the other team gets another free throw. And then the game clearly you're going to lose. That's kind of what this is. I think that, like, they potentially have control, but they're losing control. So it's just erratic. They're just launching balls from the 3-point line. They're just wherever they can get a shot off, just as hoping something will go in. I think that's the position that we're in. So it makes sense that, yes, part of it's because they just don't care. Part of it's just the brazenness of power and the corruption of power. But part of it is also because I think that they're horribly desperate. And that's really what the Iran war is in the first place. It's horrible desperation. And the fact that we've been lied to so blatantly like, I'm under the impression that the United States attempted to invade Iran. That's what the quote rescue mission was about. I mean, you don't send that many military personnel and that many very expensive and valuable aircraft to rescue one person. That's usually a strategic operation. And you see the whole battlefield just, well, it's not a battlefield, it's a rescue field, littered with military personnel and military equipment. I think the Iranians beat the hell out of the Americans, is what I think. Or the Americans, sabotage those planes because the Iranians were going to get possession of them or something. They already got possession of a bunch of drones. I feel like the Iranians might have actually kicked America's ass because America just has too many assets to spread out. And I feel like part of that is because the Israelis lied to us and they told us they have no ability to shoot planes down. What are you talking about? Our intel is solid. What, you're a Holocaust denier because you don't believe that the Iranians can't shoot down your planes? Just send them in. These are American soldiers. They're not Jewish, so it's okay. And then if they get shot down, maybe they can shoot planes. That's our bad. We're sorry about that. Oops. And there's people still I just heard someone else making, I think it was I was on another radio show. Someone was making the argument, well, Trump's really mad with the Israelis. Well, he's been really mad with them his entire administration. I mean, if you're really, really that mad with people and you don't trust them, I mean, I don't know why you keep listening to them. I don't know what they have on you. But anyway, how about a little bit of humor? Would you like some humor? Since I'm going to play this off of the Google Chrome instead of Safari browser, let me know in the chat if you cannot hear this. It should come through crystal clear, but please let me know if you cannot hear this. Let's just have a little bit of humor injected into the show tonight. Here is Pete Hegseth describing how the bombing process works. Bombs Away, featuring Pete Hegseth. Okay, so people in the audio version of the show can hear this. It looks like it's not going to come through on the Google Chrome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch it over to Safari and I'll play it for you. Again, I know that you can see the video. We have the audio going in the archive, several archives, and then we have the YouTube and X and Facebook. So I guess it doesn't come through it's not going to come through on the Google Chrome, probably because I'm using Google Chrome for StreamYard. So let me do this. Let me remove that. And thank you for letting me know in the chat quickly. Let me pull this down and I'll throw up the other share screen and we'll play it again. It's good humor. The music also sounds like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So I got an extra chuckle out of it. All right, here it is. We'll play it again. It's good enough to play twice. Bombs Away, featuring Pete Hegseth. Here we go.
Secretary Hegseth, regarding the escalating conflict in Iran, what is our exact strategy with the bombs?
The bombs. I'll tell you about the bombs. Nerd. You think Iran knows bombs. I mastered the bombs in 2004 at a frat house in Hoboken. Phase 1, the Jaeger bomb. German engineering. You take a shot of Jägermeister, you drop it into a crisp glass full of Red Bull, and you chug. Total, immediate devastation of your central nervous system.
Sir, we're referring to the bombings in the Middle East.
Phase 2, the sake bomb. You balance the sake shot on 2 chopsticks over a Japanese lager. I prefer an ice-cold Sapporo. Now you pound the table with your fists like a goddamn patriot until it drops. Full Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Boom. Sake bomb!
Okay. Well, have there been any updates on a possible end date to this war?
And if they push us, we go nuclear. Phase 3, the Irish car bomb. Jameson. Bailey's. Drop straight into a pint of Guinness. You have to chug it before the cream curdles. It is a race against time and your own gag reflex. Every last drop, you bozos.
Oh my God. I can smell him.
You media elites, weak, pathetic nerds, you can't handle these bombs? Now who's got a lighter? I'm doing a flaming Dr. Pepper.
All right, that's the a little bit of humor for the show tonight. That might actually be real. That might not be AI. That might be a real video of Pete Hegseth. And if he gets drunk enough, he'll take his shirt off and show you his tattoos. He's got a whole bunch of them. He's got tattoos from it says Deus Vult, God wills it. He's got the Jerusalem cross tattoo. It's interesting, huh? That's the Secretary of War. I would imagine that he's going to lose his job by the end of, we'll say by the summer of next year. I would assume he's going to lose his job. Not a prediction. I just think he's probably going to lose his job because clearly the Iranians beat the hell out of us and we lost, whatever was or wasn't a war. And then we lost face and we're trying to save face. And I'm pretty sure he'll get the out like some of the other people have, like Pam Bondi as well. In the chat room tonight, Boomer Sooner said it's always sunny in Philadelphia. Yes. He's the male version of Crazy Patty. Why is she so crazy? Because she's slashing beer prices. The beer should not be this cheap. It's way below the cost of normal beer. Oh my God, I love It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. There's that one scene where the one episode they start out talking about what's in the news, like there's uranium smuggled into Syria. It's like, oh my God, I can't go into Syria now. I don't care. All right. Thank you so much for tuning into the show tonight. tstradio.info, rdgable@yahoo.com. Yes, cool channel name. No new taxes. We'll just increase the old taxes. rdgable@yahoo.com. Give us a shout on social media. The links are all below in the show description. And other than that, welcome to the show. That's kind of our introduction. I spend a lot of time trying to break down and get my thoughts out. And then we can spend time going through the actual details of what is going on. I can show you the evidence for what I say. I wanted to read you something, though, first. I wanted to read you a quote from George Washington. Among other, I would say, pretty famous quotes, George Washington had a lot to say about foreign influence in government. Here's one of the things that George Washington had to say. He said, "Against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, the jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government." He also said, "As avenues to foreign influence in innumerable ways, such attachments are particularly alarming to the truly enlightened and independent patriot. How many opportunities do they afford to tamper with domestic factions, to practice the arts of seduction, to mislead public opinion, to influence or awe the public councils?" There's a large number of other George Washington quotes as well to that effect, as there are of many other of our founding fathers in the United States, which is why I'm always confused how people who claim to be patriots and Americans, you would assume the people running the Department of Homeland Security are, quote, patriots, but the DHS posted this. Department of Homeland Security posted a George Washington quote. It says, "It is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey his will, to be grateful for his benefits, and humbly to implore his protection and favor." George Washington. "Have faith," they add, "in God and country." And it appears to be a photo of George Washington, a painting of George Washington. It says faith in God and country. Now, the problem with this that I have is obviously 9 out of 10 people read that and they just assume, well, it's not LGBTQ friendly. It's about God. So it's great to see that God is back in the conversation in America. And sure, there's a very, very small part of me that has that initial reaction too. And then when you read into it, you realize it's not really about God. It's not really about your religion. It's about those foreign entities that George Washington was warning about. Because there was a moment a couple of months ago when the propaganda shifted. The propaganda shifted from you're a Holocaust denier and you're an anti-Semite. I mean, that's still there, but it shifted from that to Christ is King and we're going to rededicate the country to God. Now, of course, by changing the propaganda and focusing it on God and Jesus more so than just forcing people to, by compelling them, forcing them to think a certain way, you tap into what they already believe. And through that, you manipulate it and you use it to support your agenda, which, of course, is if you believe in God, if you have faith in Jesus, in Christ, then you're obligated to support Israel. You're obligated to support Israel's wars. So having faith in God and country and quoting George Washington is really kind of, in a sense, politically, historically blasphemous, because they're only using these types of optics to manipulate the public into believing that because they're faithful Christians that they have to support a foreign government. That's what this propaganda is. If it's not clear already, that's what this propaganda is. It's about getting the public to support a foreign entity, a foreign government, which again is completely contradictory to the founding of this country, which is why it is just blasphemous to use George Washington's name in that propaganda. Now let's go to, I'm using X for this because I had posted this on X. I posted this comment with some screenshots on the 7th of April. And of course, you can see that, well, nobody is able to really see it. And so it just kind of sits there in limbo. But at least I can see it, although sometimes I honestly can't see my own posts. I have to search for my own posts. That's how restrictive X is. But it's a freedom platform, Ryan. Like you gotta go to Rumble. Rumble's a freedom platform. No, it's run by people like Peter Thiel. It's not a freedom platform. One of the wealthiest people in the world runs X. I mean, I guess technically the wealthiest, but maybe technically not if you consider other families. But Musk is not concerned with freedom of speech. So X is just a cesspit of censorship. And it's also closely aligned, contractually aligned with CHEQ, Czech, which is an Israeli company. So anyway, I said this. I said, well, this is how it goes. Trump threatens Iran with genocide. That whole civilization is going to end tonight thing that people were freaking out about, rightfully so, understandably so. I mean, anybody that supports that is an accessory, as far as I'm concerned. That is the definition of terrorism. And it's contradictory to all the initial things we were told. We're going to free these people, and then we're actually going to kill all of them. Everybody gets worked up. It doesn't happen. Trump then gets credit for being restrained and peaceful at a time when his peace title is tarnished with war. You see how that works? And it doesn't take a genius to figure this out. It's pretty simple. You know, it's a really, really visible thing to see. It's not hidden. It's not esoteric. It's really out there in the open. The president of peace, his reputation, which is already it's already a fabricated thing, but it's, you know, in the minds of the general public, maybe it's a little more solid than it actually is. But it's being tarnished by this war that isn't a war. So how they script it is just like this. We say we're negotiating. We're going to offer peace. They reject it. They don't want peace. They're crazy and wicked. But despite that, we're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep fighting for peace. And then we're going to finally get it temporarily. And so I said a so-called ceasefire is worked out, as in Gaza numerous times, where it turned out to be fake, as with the peace deal. It was a theatrical production run by Jewish media. And make no mistake, it's run by Jewish media. The Palestinians were said to break the peace. It repositioned Israel as the defender rather than the aggressor. And now the same thing is happening in Iran. And of course, we had Laura Loomer, who, like so many other Israelis, have done to her face what the Israelis have done to Gaza, and that is carpet bomb it with chemical munitions and strategic explosive devices until it looks like a mask from the Saw movie series. And Laura Loomer says, quote, "The biggest mistake you can ever make is trusting the word of a Muslim. Muslims are taught to engage in taqiyya, the act of permissible lying. In every mosque, Muslims are taught it's okay to lie for the sake of advancing Islam. Iran will violate the ceasefire because the Iranian regime is controlled by genocidal Muslims who can't, or rather who chant death to America." I wonder if she gets only $6,000 because she misspelled the word by. "This is mainstream Islam. It can't be negotiated with. Our country will be attacked by Islamic terrorists again, and likely Iranian proxies. Everyone knows it. It's inevitable, it seems." So Laura Loomer posts that. Now, we can also take just a moment here to point out that the biggest mistake you can ever make is trusting the word of a Jew. Jews are taught to engage in deceptive acts against Gentiles. It teaches this in the Talmud. On the other hand, to be very fair to Jews and to be fair to rabbis, it is also true that the Talmud teaches that you shouldn't engage in these kinds of behaviors. However, the Talmud specifically and explicitly teaches that it's acceptable to do these types of things under certain circumstances. Those circumstances include when lying could bring about some sort of peace, which is interesting because that's precisely what taqiyya is in Islam, when quote unquote lying can kind of bring about peace. I mean, what taqiyya is it's the not necessarily lying, but it's covering your identity so that you're not slaughtered, so you're not killed by radical, crazy people. And in history, Jews were going to kill you, so you concealed your identity so they wouldn't kill you. In the same case, or the same way, the same types of cases where the Jews had to conceal their identity so people wouldn't kill them. And that's what it is. And if you go to the Talmud, you can read something to that effect in Yevamot 65b, among other places. So it teaches Jacob never issued this command, but his sons falsely attributed this statement to him in order to preserve peace between them and Joseph. So the rabbis interpret that as it's okay to lie so long as you do it to establish peace. So you can't trust a Muslim, can't trust a Jew. Muslims and Jews are both taught to engage in this kind of behavior. That's the one thing you can say about the Christians. They're not taught that. They are, on the other hand, taught to cover up that whole molesting children thing. And that's more than just the Catholics. However, Iran will violate the ceasefire, which means that Israel will violate the ceasefire. It's just, you just have to learn to read the language. And it's really simple because when you learn how to read it, it's usually the inverse. And then you read it and you're like, oh, well, that means Israel's going to violate the ceasefire. That means you can't trust Jews. That means the Jews are taught to lie to you, which is what Laura Loomer's doing to advance the cause of Judaism and the Greater Israel Project and so on and so forth. And you kind of get the picture and understand what I'm saying here. So big surprise. And people then go on pretending it's all over. This is what you've seen all over social media, all over the television, all over the radio. You've heard it. You were really stupid if you thought Donald Trump was an idiot. It's the art of the deal. He got an agreement worked out. And it turns out it didn't last more than a few minutes, a few hours. And then what will happen is when the hammer comes back down, it won't be genocidal. It won't be a whole civilization will die tonight. Instead, it'll be self-defense because those damn Iranians, they didn't even want to have talks with us. We forced them to have talks with us. And we finally shook them up. We got them to agree to this deal. And then they violated it. So we have to kill all their children. That's the narrative being created here, right? I think it's very clear that's what it is. And so there is not, and there will not be peace in the Middle East, at least until Israel is annihilated and the U.S. withdraws. Now, I want to make something very clear. When I say things like that, I'm genuinely not advocating for Israel to be annihilated. What I'm saying is, in the same way I'm not advocating for a violent uprising against the government, for multiple reasons. I just think that there isn't, first of all, there's very few people in the general public, 1% or less than that, who have the ability, even if that were to take place, to actually reshape and reform things and make it better. I mean, it's basically like Bananas with Woody Allen. You go from one dictator to you have to wear your underwear on the outside and change them every, 20 minutes or something. Underwear must be worn on the outside. That's what would eventually happen. You just go from one form of idiocracy to another. It's so that's the main reason I would never advocate for something like that, at least in the modern day. People are not educated enough to do it. It would be just as bad. So besides all the other reasons, which may or may not be obvious, the point of what I'm getting at here, what I'm trying to say is the only way things would change is if there was a violent uprising. And I don't have to advocate for that or think like, I hope that happens. That's just the nature of tyranny. That's the nature of, it's just how history works. That's how things have always happened. I mean, if you're a bad person, you want to do bad things, and there's good people in power, you corrupt them, blackmail them, you get dirt on them, you control them. And if there's bad people in power, you have to do something equal to worse to them to get them out of power. So that's just a lesson of history. And in the same way, that's a lesson of history. Here we are with another lesson of history in the case of Israel. I don't have to advocate for Israel being destroyed. I don't have to advocate for Tel Aviv, Herzliya, and all the other cities being leveled. But I can tell you that nothing's going to change in the region until that place is eliminated. I'll say it again. You don't have to advocate for it. But history shows us nothing is going to change. I believe pretty firmly, having studied history just for a short period of time, it really doesn't take that long to realize this, but I firmly believe now that the United States, like General Patton said, fought the wrong enemy and that we should have sided with the Germans. And I know people think that means you would want to kill all the Jews. Well, that wasn't the plan, so that's not what I'm saying. So you shouldn't assume that. But I think we should have teamed up with the Germans, and we should have invested in their economic might, and we should have also destroyed communism in Russia. I agree with General Patton. I think we fought the wrong enemy, and I just imagine what would the world be like if we had, pride, that German pride and that Japanese pride, and we had those Japanese and German diets. We'd probably be a lot healthier. We'd have a lot more civility, a lot more honor and dignity in society. But that's just kind of like an alternative history thing that you can think about. The essence of what I'm saying here is, what I'm sprinkling onto the show tonight is, I think we're the bad guys. I don't necessarily think Iran's the good guys, but I know that we're the bad guys. You know, it's like if you're watching, I don't know, basketball, football, hockey, and you need another team to win, even if they're a rival, because if they win and they beat this other team because of the standings, then you'll make the playoffs. So a team that's really your rival, you want them to win this game because they're not really your friends, and you're going to have to probably play them later anyway. But you kind of want them to win this game, because if they don't win this game and beat this other team, then you're not going to make the playoffs. And that's kind of how, just use a sports analogy, that's kind of how this is. Like, I don't have to be a fan of Germany. My phone alarm's going off there. I apologize for that. I don't have to be a fan of Germany, or I don't have to be a fan of Iran, but I can say that, I hope that they win this one, because the people that they're fighting against are, we kind of need those people to lose in order to make the playoffs and in order to even have a chance at winning the title. Again, to use a sports analogy. So I don't have to advocate for it, but I can tell you that Israel is the root source of the problem. And that's also part of the script, for the record, because Israel wants it. They want it real bad. They are sadomasochists, hence the name of tonight's show. Pants on Hellfire, Israeli sadomasochism, and the irony of peace. The Israelis want it. It's that govern me harder, daddy meme. They're like, bomb us harder, daddy. They want that because that justifies their wickedness. It justifies what they believe. We're being, oh no, we're being ganged up on. They don't like us because we're Jews. That's what they believe. So if you stopped bombing them and you stopped criticizing them, they would do horrible things to create the conditions that you're going to bomb them and criticize them again. That's the nature of what we're dealing with. So until that is understood and there are policies put in place to deal with that, nothing will ever change. You have to understand, and I don't mean this like me speaking to you. You need to understand that. I just mean like it needs to be understood in any situation. Like, what does your enemy, or what do your allies for that matter, what do they believe? What are their religious convictions? That's important. Are they making decisions based on these supernatural etheric things? Our leaders are. The Israelis clearly are. That's important. I mean, at the very least, if it's important that the Iranians are supposedly making decisions based on what they believe, what their faith is, what their religion is, then it certainly matters if the Israelis or the Americans are making decisions based on that. Doesn't it? I think that's actually kind of a whole point. I don't know how many other points there are, but that's a big one. That's a big point, a really important point. And it takes us back to, I played this at least on one show this week. It takes us back to the clip of Pete Hegseth, the Jaeger bomb, Irish car bomb, and the sake bomb, master. I'm so used to saying mashta. I say masta. The sake bomb master, Pete Hegseth, talking about one of the downed soldiers in Iran, and talking about how they were Jesus. If you haven't heard it, you might think I'm making it up. If you've heard it, you still might think I made it up. It sounds utterly ridiculous because it is. Let's listen to that again. Here's Pete Hegseth.
Transponder. His first message was simple, and it was powerful. He sent a message: God is good. In that moment of isolation and danger, his faith and fighting spirit shone through. You see, shot down on a Friday, Good Friday, hidden in a cave, a crevice, all of Saturday, and rescued on Sunday. Flown out of Iran as the sun was rising on Easter Sunday. A pilot reborn, all home and accounted for, a nation rejoicing. God is good.
And that, of course, is part of the same propaganda that you see from the Department of Homeland Security. God is good. He's like Jesus, and Jesus was a Jew, so you should worship him. That's another talking point. Well, you worship a Jew, so why don't you support Israel? In relation to the violent uprising and the destruction of Israel, listener in the chat, DM Thigling, says, I think we have to separate the nation of Israel from some of the Jews outside of Israel, no. I guess is what they're asking or implying. And yeah, I agree with you. I agree. I was texting a friend of mine this morning, and I said the same thing that I just explained to you to them, and they said, "Yeah, of course, we have to make sure that we don't say those things, and say them with the implication of collateral damage to innocent people." It's like I get that, but see, that's I get that, but there's a bigger issue here. The bigger issue is history is not kind. Human existence is not kind. It's not necessarily evil, but it's not kind. And again, you don't have to be an advocate for it. I'm just saying that's really the only solution that's left. It's like if you have some terminal illness and you are going to die, whether it's from the treatment or it's from the illness itself, whatever that illness might be or whatever might actually legitimately cause it besides a virus, and you're terminally ill, you're going to die anyway, which Israel is going to, in some capacity, die anyway. They have a terminal illness. It's called self-centeredness, but it's also just, I think, the divine plan. As far as I'm concerned, Israel they are a threat to the existence of civilization, and I do not believe that whatever the creative force in the universe is, Israel is going to be allowed to stand any further. So they're terminal, and if you're terminal, a lot of people might want to. I don't know if you can so much in the U.S. I know you can in Canada now. You choose the option of just like medical suicide. I don't want to go through this pain anymore. Just kill me. And then you die, and then look, the disease is gone. Yeah, well, you're also gone, but the disease is gone too. And that's kind of what's going to happen with Israel. Like, they're already terminal, but you don't want to kill somebody, but what's the context of it? And the thing is, even before this bombardment of Tel Aviv started happening, people were fleeing Israel anyway. And I personally do not buy into the every Jewish person is involved in some grand conspiracy. I don't believe in that at all. And I think that there are equally as many Christians, Muslims, atheists, and technocrats involved in horrible things that happen in the world. Jews do disproportionately have control of media, entertainment, and finance because of the long history of Jews in those fields, because Christians and Muslims were barred from entering those fields. So we're talking about generations, thousands of centuries of the buildup of wealth. It's not a conspiracy. It's just a fact. You want to learn about it, you can read my book, Protocols of Goyim. It's a very large book. It's available at tstradio.info. In fact, that's one of the main reasons I wrote the book, was to find out why those stereotypes exist. But Jews were fleeing Israel. As a matter of fact, as I played you on the show earlier this week, there are more than any other part of the Middle East. If you say the Middle East in general, how Americans perceive that, if you were to say, who has the most Jews outside of Israel, I mean, other than New York City, in the region, who has the most Jews? Well, I haven't done a head count, but reportedly, it's Iran. So in other words, Iran is filled. I'll pull that up for you so you can see it too. Iran is filled with Jews and Christians and Zoroastrians, if that's how they are still referring to themselves. I assume that it is. Zoroastrianism, I assume that they call themselves Zoroastrians. They would be slaughtered too. They're part of that 92.4 million people that live in Iran, which shows you that Israel is not a Jewish state. It's a homicidal state. It's a crazy, psychotic state of evil. And evil comes in a whole variety of forms. For as many Jews that live in Iran and don't want anything to do with Israel as Jews that live anywhere else and don't want anything to do with Israel, Orthodox rabbis in New York and so on, there are just as many Christians who live in Israel who want to see Israel be attacked and almost destroyed, so they think God's going to come back and save them. And I think that there might be a connection to the UFO disclosure narrative there as well, as we discussed. on the previous show. But let me play you this clip. You can see what's happening in Iran.
That's who Iran wants to kill, is all the Jews.
Iran's intent to exterminate the Jewish people.
In the Islamic Republic of Iran, the second largest Jewish population in the Middle East outside of Israel.
We've been in Iran for 2,700 years.
Homayun Someyah is the president of the Tehran Jewish Committee.
In Iran, we have complete freedom to carry out our religious duties.
There's a lot more religious diversity in this country than many people know about. For instance, in Isfahan alone, there are 13 synagogues.
Chair Behravan used to live in New York City. One thing he values in Iran, he says, is the absence of anti-Semitism.
I feel safer here than probably United States.
Sion Machgrefte is the head of Isfahan's Jewish community, and he says we consider ourselves Iranian Jews, not Israeli Jews.
I cannot live without Iranian culture.
Mossadegh is an elected member of Iran's parliament.
My decision about Israel based on the Iranian national interest. Everyone who is enemy of my country is enemy of me.
So Iran has the second largest population of Jews in the region, and they would have been destroyed if Trump were to actually literally carry out the order of destroying the entire country. So in other words, they'll slaughter their own people, as you've already seen them used as shields underneath of apartment buildings and whatnot in Tel Aviv. And they place that blame on the people in Gaza. Hamas, they hide under hospitals, so we have to blow up everything. So there are people that run away from it, and there are equally as many Christians that run to it. They love it. They love it. But, again, there is a disproportionate amount of people that are involved in this that are Jewish and that have this belief of superiority, and they've projected that master race concept onto the Germans. And then you read some of the Epstein files, and here are wealthy billionaire Jews talking about how there should be genetic testing to allow people to come into these groups and movements and businesses because you can't have non-Jews in them. Scott Larson in the chat said, Alex Jones Jew freak out meme funny. Yes, I actually have. Maybe you saw that when I brought the page up, but I have that pulled up, and I have to play it. It's so great.
I'm just I'm just 25 hours a day. But as you go through it, then it goes into Jews and talks about Jews over and over and over. Jews. It's always fresh to me. I love it. It's one about Jews. He's a Jew.
Again, it's funny because if it were Islam, it's acceptable. I mean, you can just Islam, Muslim, until the word doesn't have any meaning anymore. Remember, I'm not the guy that counts the number of Jews in things. I'm the guy that counts the number of Muslims who are not in things. I'm just trying to bring balance to the force. And I mean that genuinely. That's what I'm trying to do. So going back to Diem's message in the, not direct message, but Diem Segling in the chat, talking about Israelis and Jews, that's an important thing to point out. But again, if you want anything to change, history shows us that Israel will have to be obliterated like Gaza. Israel will have to be annihilated like Gaza. And there'll have to be a violent uprising to water the tree of liberty with the blood of tyrants if anything is going to change in the United States. And again, I'm not advocating for it for a large number of reasons. Was it going to be there's going to be some insurrection, like a genuine one, and then who's going to take power? Some crazy wacko QAnon mega supporter from the Midwest who gets into office and thinks he's taking phone calls from Q. That would be worse than Trump. It would be worse than Biden. At least these people are like kind of politicians. You want the QAnon shaman to be president? Who do you want to be in the Oval Office? Who do you want to be in the White House? Somebody who read, literally all they do is read Reddit all day, who thinks that there's, I don't know, reptilians under the White House? Or what was it, I think it's insectoids. There's insectoids living under the White House. Is that who you want in the White House? Is that who you want in the Oval Office? Frankly, I would still take Trump. I'd still take Netanyahu, because at least it's like an understandable level of crazy. At least I understand what motivates them. It's not some psychological AI slop on the internet. I mean that in a joking way, but I also mean that quite literally. Kushner in the Kushner's bunghole. Who was it that said that? What president had used that word to buy pants? Was that who was that? You know what I'm talking about? The president who called up the tailor and he's like, I'm gonna need some pants and make sure they don't ride up my bunghole. I think it was Johnson, wasn't it? Such a great clip. Kushner's bunghole in the chat said QAnon shaman went left. I would assume he probably already or always was there and he was playing a part, but maybe he wasn't. These people are just, they come out of nowhere. They pop up out of nowhere. You listen to them, they get notoriety. You know, the QAnon shaman was even parodied on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. You know, Danny DeVito's character Frank, he was involved in he was involved in Rudy Giuliani's hair dye issue. he was involved in, I guess, or maybe it was Dennis and Charlie from that show. They sold, I know what it was. They were making masks or something. They sold some of the stuff to the QAnon shaman. That show is so funny. I mention it on almost every episode of this show. It's almost like I get paid to say it. I don't. It's such a funny show. It's something it's like the bridge between what this is, like what is happening, and then my job, and then also some really good comedy. So Jew, Muslim. They're obsessed with Muslims. Totally obsessed with Muslims. Let's listen to what the president had to say as we work our way into hour number 2 here. I'll remind you that we don't take super chats on YouTube, so please go to Cash App. Please go to Buy Me a Coffee. Please get a copy of one of my books, like Protocols of Goyim. It is an 800-page book, roughly 800 pages, size 10 font, packed with information. It's a heavy one. tstradio.info. Get a copy of it today. The links are below most of the places that you are listening. That's Protocols of Goyim. Don't get it on Amazon. It's much more expensive. Just get it on the website. Here is the president talking about the so-called ceasefire.
You saw the bridge one. We were very close to a deal. And then I got a call from Mr. Witkoff, Mr. Kushner.
Oh, Kushner's bunghole called him.
Saying, I think they're breaking the deal. I said, tell them that's okay. Don't worry about it. But tell them to look out their window and watch. And within 45 minutes, I gave the order to knock out the biggest bridge. I gave the order, knock out the biggest bridge in, I believe, the Middle East, but the biggest bridge in Iran.
So I was confused when I first saw this because I thought that there was only one ceasefire.
You saw the bridge one. We were very close to a deal.
They were working on a deal before. Now that's really interesting. It's really, 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 really interesting. Why? Because the Iranians have said repeatedly that they have not been talking to the United States. So how were they working on a deal and then suddenly the deal fell through and so we had to blow up one of the bridges? The Israelis have lied to us. You have Jared Kushner telling the president, look, I'm doing my best, but you, as Laura Loomer had said, can't trust a Muslim. And Trump said, we're going to have to blow up the bridge. Iran said, well, hold on a second. I know you're going to do it anyway because you do whatever the Jews tell you to do, but we're not negotiating. We haven't seen Kushner. What are you talking about? So the president probably genuinely does think that the Iranians were negotiating, we were going to get peace, and then they just broke the peace deal, which is ironically what the U.S. has done twice, and it's been under Kushner both times. It's going to be peace. It's going to be peace. bomb them. So Iran has cut off diplomatic ties with the U.S. That's an official report. That's an official story. They cut off ties with the U.S. So how do you negotiate if the phone is not plugged in? You don't. And who's at the center of all of this? Who's at the center of the 2025 negotiations and then bombing? Who is at the center of the 2026 negotiations and bombing? Kushner, both times. And who's at the center of the Gaza fake peace deal? Kushner. And who's at the center of the ongoing, quote, negotiations that led to a real ceasefire that wasn't a ceasefire because the Jews just couldn't stop slaughtering Christians in Lebanon. They had to do it. God promised them the death of Christians 3,000 years ago, so they had to do it. Couldn't stop. It was Kushner. See, this is why people think Jews run everything, because here you have Kushner and Witkoff, both Jews, telling the president they're making a deal. Oh, they broke it. You're going to have to bomb them. And then they just sit back and like, this guy's an idiot. Clearly, we're not even talking to the Iranians. And then he comes back again. Mr. President, they broke the deal. We have to bomb them again. It's the same person. The phone's not plugged in. I mean, I honestly, at this point, would not be surprised if I was the conspiracy fly and I had a podcast on the Apple Store and I flew into the Oval Office and I watched what they were doing. I would not be, it would not shock me. In fact, SNL should do a skit on this. Get the Jews at SNL to write a skit about this. I think it would be funny. Where the president is, maybe they already have. I don't watch SNL, but I feel like you get the president on the phone. He's negotiating with Iran, but the phone's unplugged. It's not even plugged in. You know, or maybe it's like maybe he's on the phone and the cow goes, that's unacceptable. You got to open the Strait of Hormuz. The pig says, I honestly think that's what's happening in the Oval Office. Maybe I'll take back what I said earlier. Maybe we should get the QAnon shaman in there. Maybe he could get something done. I mean, it is a joke. It is. Iran isn't even talking to the United States. And who's at the forefront of telling us what they are or not saying? It's two Jews who have a vested interest in keeping both the war in Ukraine going and the endless conflicts in the name of Israeli supremacy and Jewish supremacy. Two Jews. And that's what it's all based on. Just two people that are given the reins to do all of this. And then the military springs into action. Shame on those soldiers for carrying out those orders. Shame on those military personnel. You can't shame me. Oh, you don't like the military. That was like so 2001. And then it got popular to hate the military. And I think we've kind of evened out now where it's like, if you're being given these kinds of orders, like if the president actually had given the order, like exterminate everybody, just I don't care what weapons you use, just wipe the country off the face of the earth. Legally, our military cannot carry out those orders. That is the definition of genocide and ethnic cleansing. It would be illegal under both international and federal domestic law. So no, I'm not proud to be an American. I'm actually, quite frankly, ashamed to be an American. I am. Yeah, people think that you're kind of cool. You go to certain countries, especially go to Japan, people think Americans are kind of cool. You know what the most common thing I've been asked in Japan, one of the most common things? Why are you so skinny? And that's not like an Italian thing, like, why are you so skinny to eat more? It's more of like, why are you so skinny? You look good. Are you European? A lot of people think I'm European. Like, no, not European. Why would you think I'm European? Because you're not fat. That's what the world thinks of us. The other thing people say is, "You're really respectful. Are you you're not an American, are you? Why would you not think I'm an American because I'm respectful?" Because Americans don't take the time to learn the culture. Then Americans don't take time to do anything. They just arrogantly believe whatever they want to believe. It's like, I'm ashamed that that's the image of America. And I don't say it because I hate America. I say it because we could do better. We should do better. We should. You're not going to get me with patriotic songs. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm now controlled by Palantir. Because you're not free. And I don't care how many boots you stick up people's rear ends. What is that? You know, like those commercials when you go, I don't see them obviously on TV over here or in the movies when I go to the movies. But when I used to go to the movies in the US a lot, I would see those Air Force commercials. Or I'd see, usually the Air Force, once in a while be like an Army commercial. You see these Air Force commercials. You see the planes flying around and soldiers doing soldier stuff. And I sit back and watch that like I watch the soda commercials. You know, let's all go to the movies, and they got popcorn and the soda. And all I'm looking at that thinking, I'm thinking that shouldn't be consumed by humans. And to me, it doesn't click with me. It has a friend of mine, we used to go to the movies and we both felt the same way. And we used to say, kind of like, it's like a Jedi mind trick type of a thing. These guys used to say to each other, like, yeah, your sorcery has no power here. It's like, I can see through, I know what the ingredients are and that I'm not eating that. I'm not drinking that. It's garbage. That's how I see the military commercials. I just think, I don't care if the plane flies fast. It's really childish. Like, I don't care if the plane flies fast. I don't care if the gun makes a big sound. Boom. Oh, that's so cool. I'm going to sign up to join the military. Militaries are necessary. But you're not going to like manipulate me into thinking that that's cool. I don't think it's cool. And it also doesn't make me anti-American. I don't care. You know, maybe, how about a commercial about the Constitution? How about a commercial about the rule of law? How about a commercial about what power the president actually has? That would be educational for the public. That would be educational. The public really needs to see that. The public needs to see what power the president actually has. I don't care what Congress says, just wage war. Well, he doesn't have the authority to do that. Well, they got this act and that act. Yeah, but you have to have congressional approval to go to war. But not if they attack us first. Where does it say that? Just like this, it's just the same talking points that we had with Iraq, the same talking points we had with Afghanistan. It's the same story over and over and over and over and over and over again. Never changes. I thought that this was pretty funny. I got a kick out of this. Usually my account's pretty shadow banned on social media, but I got a kick out of this. Michael Savage was talking about, and I don't dislike Michael Savage for the record because he talks about health stuff, and I agree with that pretty much for the most part. But he said God parts the Red Sea for the Jews to escape from Egypt. And, you know, God did not physically part a sea. It's a metaphor. And I told Michael Savage he might need to learn what a metaphor is. And Michael Savage, actually, I can't believe, actually responded to me. I said, are you not aware of what a metaphor or an allegory is? And he said, are you not aware of what nitpicking is? I say, I don't think you understand, Michael Savage, the question. And that is kind of scary. That's an issue. Like, one of the most prominent conservative voices genuinely doesn't know, I don't think, what a metaphor is. Genuinely doesn't know what an allegory is. These people are making decisions thinking that God literally opened the ocean up and let Jews walk through it. It's insane. These are the people making the decisions. These are the people that decide who dies and who lives. These are the people deciding what countries and what borders get redrawn, if they can survive or not. We get to decide who gets the oil and who doesn't get the oil. We get to decide who lives and who dies. These are the people that think that the ocean opened up and Jews walked through the ocean because God's so great. It's a freaking allegory. It's a metaphor. It's a story. And people that just seem relatively smart otherwise literally believe that. It's insane. It's insane. No conscious awareness whatsoever. And ultimately, Michael Savage is just like the other side of the Mark Levin coin. Just another version of it. So is all these other conservative talking heads. Just absolutely no awareness whatsoever. These are the people making the decisions. You think Mark Levin's crazy. He's crazy because he just wants to have war. Well, these other conservative people that are, quote, against the war aren't much better. Because today's critics are tomorrow's tyrants. Give the critics control, and they turn into tyrants who tell you to put your underwear on the outside. Nothing changes because we have a social, moral, cultural issue. And unless you fix that, it doesn't matter. Have all the revolutions you want, spill all the blood you want, drop all the bombs, cut all the heads off you want, hang all the people. It's not going to change anything if the general public doesn't know what a metaphor is. If the general public doesn't know what the founding documents of the country say. All of it otherwise is just, it's live action role playing. I see Joseph Lavelle in the chat. He was my friend I was talking to this morning. And we were talking about the ceasefire. And he said, J.D. Vance is, quote, against the war too. I keep hearing that, Joseph. I keep hearing that over and over and over. J.D. Vance behind the scenes. He was working to save Trump from this war. And you know what I thought? I thought, you know what they're going to do? You know what they're going to do? Trump's going to eventually be done. They're going to either kill him, he's going to have a heart attack, or he's going to have some other medical condition, and he's going to be gone. Whether that almost sounded like Trump. He's going to be gone. It's going to be gone, or they're going to have, they're going to have a push toward the end of his presidency to get J.D. Vance in power. And if this war thing goes on for any longer, it's going to be the scar that's going to scar Trump and MAGA. So they're going to break off like a Kit Kat bar, J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance is going to be like, well, I was against the war. I'm the real savior for America. And by the way, I really want to be president. And since I was against all that other stuff, please vote for me. And then it's kind of like a movie or something where the cute girl's at the door and she's like, can I come in for a second? And the guy's like, yeah, sure. Do you mind if I bring my friends? Well, actually, I saw a Married with Children like that. I think it was Bud Bundy was in line for concert tickets. And this girl comes up and she's like, do you mind if I cut you in line? He's like, sure, I guess. And she's like, you mind if I bring my friends? And he's like, Bud Bundy said, yeah, sure. Are they hot like you? She's like, I think so. And then she just brings all these like big buff guys. They pick Bud Bundy up and they throw him to the back of the line. That's pretty much what this is. It is open the door and who's going to come in? J.D. Vance like, can I be president? Can I come in and be president? Sure, J.D., you were against the war in Iran. We'd love to have you as president. You're the new MAGA. Do you mind if I bring my friends? Are they as MAGA as you are, J.D.? I think so. Bring them in. And then you open the door, and who walks in? It's Peter Thiel and Sam the Alterer of Man and a bunch of gay technocrats. That's who walks in. And then they say, the Constitution didn't protect us from what Trump did. He was a menace. So we're going to have to, I have an idea. Why don't we install like a computer to make decisions, and we'll have like a, what do they call that? A techno-monarchy. We need a monarchy because that is what J.D. Vance believes. And that is what Peter Thiel believes in. And then you'll end up with a vampire and a guy that wears eyeliner in the Oval Office. And you'll think, oh, that's America now. That's, I think, what it's all about. And then it opens the door for the technocrats and tech bros, says Joseph. Yep. Cool channel name said, the irony of the Bundys is that they are one of the wealthiest families in the world. Yeah. I thought you were going to say something else. I thought you were going to say that the funny thing about the Bundys is that show is on. Al Bundy could work at a shoe store, not sell any shoes, and still afford that house. You'd have to work, 2 jobs today, and you still can barely afford to pay for stuff. That's how it works. Can I bring some of my friends in? Are they as patriotic as you are, JD Vance? Absolutely. All right, let him in. And JD Vance comes into the Oval Office. They bring in the supercomputer. Checkmate. That's how it goes down. That's how it works. So Iran has cut off diplomatic ties with the U.S., and so I don't know how they were even having conversations, probably because the Israelis lied to us about that too, which, that is what happened. In the same way that the Mossad attempted to overthrow the Iranian government over and over again, when that didn't work, just like the economic hitman story, they go to the military. Israel thought they could spur rebellion, which also means that they were responsible for any deaths that actually did occur to protesters. In fact, the Iranians arrested and I believe they executed one of those Mossad agents. Good riddance, alongside of Leonid Ravinsky. Good riddance. Salute you on your way to hell, you disgusting Jew pervert. He said disgusting Jew. Well, you say disgusting pervert Muslim, so I'm just evening the playing field. It's called free speech. That's how it works. And you're not going to take that away from me because JD Vance puts on eyeliner. Let's go to Caroline Levitt. You know who that is. Also sounds like a Jewish name. And Caroline Levitt at the White House, she is a real piece of work, isn't she? She also might be like a long-lost distant cousin of Pam Bondi, honestly, and I mean that literally. I feel like it's just blondes kind of all look the same to me, so maybe that's why. But I also think that maybe she is probably maybe related to Pam Bondi. Most of the presidents are related to one another, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case.
I've seen a lot of inaccurate coverage today from the media about these negotiations and these plans already. So let me be clear and correct the record. The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump and his negotiating team. Many outlets in this room have falsely reported on that plan as being acceptable to the United States.
The 10-point plan was not acceptable to the United States. How dare you lie about that? It's lying media. That's all they do is lie. It's fake news. All they do is lie. Stupid fake news. Well, since most of you can't actually see the video, this video has been edited, but not in terms of what she said. It's been edited to include a screenshot from Truth Social of the president and what he had to say about the 10-point plan. And that's the same 10-point plan she said was thrown in the trash. And the same 10-point plan that Fox and Friends reported on and said this is the plan. Trump said, agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. So I'm confused. Let's listen to that again.
I've seen a lot of inaccurate coverage today from the media about these negotiations.
President said we received the 10-point plan.
So let me be clear and correct the record.
It's a good thing to negotiate with.
Put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded.
But the president said that it is, quote, it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. So I'm what am I supposed to do with that? I'm supposed to ignore that, or I'm supposed to just, we're not at war with blank, we're at war with blank. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Let's go to Fox and Friends. And by friends, they mean the Israelis. They have the 10-point plan posted. The 10-point plan includes non-aggression. The U.S. must fundamentally commit to guaranteeing non-aggression. Number 2, maritime control, continuation of Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz. Number 3, nuclear program, acceptance that Iran can enrich uranium for its nuclear program. Number 4, primary sanctions, remove all primary sanctions on Iran. Number 5, secondary sanctions, removal of all secondary sanctions against foreign entities that do business with Iranian institutions. Number 6, UN resolutions, end of all United Nations Security Council resolutions targeting Iran. Number 7, IAEA oversight, end of all International Atomic Energy Agency resolutions on Iran's nuclear program. Number 8, compensation payment to Iran for war damage. Number 9, U.S. withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region. Ceasefire on all fronts, including Israel's conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon.
That includes 10 separate points. Some of them include the U.S. guaranteeing a non-aggression pact with Iran, continuing Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, acceptance that Iran can enrich uranium for its nuclear program, removal of all primary sanctions on Iran, removal of secondary sanctions, an end of all UN Security Council resolutions against Iran, an end to the IAEA's resolutions on Iran's nuclear program, compensation payment for Iran and its war damage, withdrawal of U.S. forces from the region, and a ceasefire on all fronts. Those are a number of points that are not going to be reached, and the next 2 weeks are going to be critical as negotiators try to hammer this out.
Now, why would the president say that we received it, it's a workable basis on which to negotiate? It feels as if these are the kinds of proposals that would be proposed if you had won a war. Like, for example, the Germans have now twice been burdened with the responsibility of a world war that they did not start. What do you mean? I thought you're a history guy. The Germans did start World War II. No, the British started World War II with their pact with Poland. Everybody knew that, including Wendell Willkie, and Hitler openly, explicitly stated that. But because we're not allowed to read what he says, we can't really read what he says, so you can't hear what he says. But the point is, that's something that usually, this is what you do when you win. And why would the president say that this is acceptable to negotiate, like an acceptable basis to negotiate? And then when people like myself observe this and we say, well, hold on a second, it appears that what I'm looking at here is an acknowledgement, is an admission that the United States lost the war, or at least lost the conflict. And as a result of that, we've been put into a position where we have to capitulate to the Iranians. So what are the terms of surrender? That's what it sounds like. And when people point that out, the White House says, the president never said that. The president never did that. We didn't. What? Check my notes. Nobody said that. Oh, something is off here. Something's not kosher. Something's not halal. Something is not blessed here. There's something off about all of this. I don't understand. And for those of you thinking, well, Ryan, that's just something that someone put on a video. Maybe that's not a real thing that the president posted. Okay, that's fair. It's a fair question. Well, I can show it to you. I can show you the actual post. And he said more than that, but he mentions the 10-point peace plan, or the 10-point agreement, or whatever you want to call it. And this is based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Azim Munir of Pakistan, which we'll get to here in just a moment. And so here is what the president said. You can pause and take a screenshot of this if you'd like, or at the very least take a moment to read it. There it is. Based on conversations with Prime Minister Shabazz Sheriff, and you can go down and you can read what it says. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran. It was April 7th, and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. So somebody is lying to me here. Could it be everybody?
I've seen a lot of inaccurate coverage today from the media about these negotiations and these plans already. So let me be clear and correct the record. The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was funded.
10-point plan. And we threw it in the garbage. We didn't want it.
Unacceptable and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump and his negotiating team.
Do these people think that they're not being watched or that this stuff isn't being... That's a third argument to what I mentioned earlier. Maybe it's that they think they have so much power it doesn't matter. Maybe they're flailing. They know that they're out of time. They're just being erratic. And maybe the other thing is these are people, even though she's a little bit younger, these are people that are not used to having this much scrutiny. Now, before you had a few media outlets that talked about what you said. Now everybody can talk, it's concede in real time. I don't know if they're aware of that. I don't know if they're aware of that. That might be one of the other reasons. But wait, there's more. There's a lot more. Let's go to J.D. Vance now, talking about Lebanon. Keep that Shabazz Sharif name in your head for a moment here. Let's go to J.D. Vance. We had to wait for him to put on his eyeliner. He's all dolled up now. Let's see what J.D. Vance had to say about the ceasefire. Look at this psychopath.
Things. First of all, I actually think, and there's a lot of bad faith negotiation and a lot of bad faith, propaganda going on. I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states.
Now, that's really weird because just like the president said, we got the 10-point proposal from Iran. We think it's a workable basis on which to negotiate. Fox and Friends reports the same thing. Trump said it on Truth Social, and then the White House press secretary says the opposite. J.D. Vance says, this proposal had nothing to do with Lebanon. Nothing to do with Lebanon. And you might wonder, like, well, what are you talking about with Lebanon? Well, it's important to understand, if you're not aware of this already, that Lebanon is the reason that Iran supposedly, I guess you'd say, broke the ceasefire. So first, the Jerusalem Post posted this. Iran claims it is weighing strikes on IDF West Bank Lebanon positions after ceasefire announced. So Iran is going to attack, assuming Israel, in Lebanon and the IDF. Why would they do that? They're breaking the ceasefire. They're evil. Well, it's probably because of this. Times of Israel. So if you disagree, you're anti-Semitic, of course, denying the Holocaust. Iran halts Hormuz traffic over Israeli strikes in Lebanon. But I thought that it didn't involve Lebanon. And maybe, in a sense, it doesn't, because maybe there's confusion. According to CNN and according to what Trump had said, the ceasefire was only between the U.S. and Iran. But I guess this is where there's like some nuance. You can read this here on CNN's website. Trump says U.S. will help the traffic buildup through Strait of Hormuz. President Donald Trump on Wednesday said the U.S. will be helping with the traffic buildup in the Strait of Hormuz just hours after announcing a 2-week ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran, contingent on the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the critical waterway. And while the conservative hacks on social media are like, it's open, he did it. It's like, well, it wasn't actually closed. I know that because the Japanese are still getting oil from it, and they're also getting oil through other routes because they chose diplomacy. They chose diplomacy over bombs. They chose diplomacy over Jews. And so we know it was already open. And we also know that any part of it was closed down was because of insurance companies, because of the boats going through the area. Like, it wasn't technically shut down. So all of that was just a narrative that was spun as well. But it was technically, I guess, between the U.S. and Iran. So maybe it wasn't with, it didn't have anything to do with Lebanon. But with the U.S., because the Israelis are part of all of this, Lebanon gets drawn into this, and we can read from that same name that I brought up a moment ago, told you to remember, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. We go to his official X page where he posted his comments on this, and look at what he says. Can you read that? Can you see that? This is the guy that negotiated the deal, presumably with the snake Jared Kushner. Shehbaz Sharif says, with the greatest humility, I am pleased to announce that the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States of America, along with their allies, have agreed to an immediate ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon and elsewhere, effective immediately. So the guy that negotiated it said it was with Lebanon. The guy that negotiated it said it involved America's, quote, allies, meaning Israel. The Israelis said, nope, we get to keep bombing Lebanon. So then Iran says, well, then we're shutting down traffic. And rather than that even really being reported in the media or talked about in the media, for the most part, it's all just like, Trump's a genius, art of the deal. He got the Strait open. When in reality, it really wasn't ever technically closed, and it never really was technically reopened thus. And then also the Israelis are the reason that the ceasefire is kaput. So there's that. But there's more. Here is just another, I can't stand this guy. Fox News hack. Jesse, was it Walters, whatever his name is. Here's Jesse Waters posting. Holy smokes, missiles are raining down on Tel Aviv less than 2 hours after the ceasefire agreement.
Mike again. Mike, what are we seeing there?
Well, Jesse, as anticipated, the sirens are now wailing over Tel Aviv, indicating that another missile is inbound. And it looks like those
are actually Jews crying because the banks are shut down.
Lights in the sky are the missiles.
Did you guys hear the story that there's a bunch of Israelis that wait for the alarms to go off so they can dine and dash? Apparently that's a big problem in Israel. Oh, the missiles are coming. Quick, run. Take the food.
And it looks like you can see an interceptor that is in hot pursuit of the missiles.
Oh, yeah.
It's always quite dramatic.
Little
when
white
you
dots.
See those interceptors going after it. And these ones might disappear behind our building here, and we're going to lose sight of them.
So there's a couple of things you can get out of that. Technically, the peace negotiations was between the U.S. and Iran. So I guess technically, if Iran was still bombing Israel, then it would be okay. But according to the guy that did the negotiations, it includes Lebanon and it includes Israel. So Iran shouldn't be bombing Israel. But then you have to ask, this evidence is about as credible as a Stephen Greer video clip of UFOs. It's about as credible as the angel video or picture that he showed. It's about as credible as anything you'd see out of Project Camelot. It's about as credible as anything you'd see out of David Wilcock in his presentations. What am I looking at? A black sky with some, the dots are blurry. When was that video taken? Where did that come from? How do I know what I'm looking at? That's the evidence they have that the Iranians broke the peace deal. Some blurry dots. Let me show you how much the world believes and trusts America and the Israelis. Here is, this guy's name is Mike Waltz. Remember Mike Waltz? U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Here's Mike Waltz. And Mike Waltz is talking about the president bringing peace. He's a peace guy. He loves peace. And listen to the reaction of the audience when he says this. It is a resounding, you're a liar. This is really great stuff. Take a listen to this.
War, chaos, violence,
and more unsafe world comes to mind. But if we're being honest, that's also the world that we're living in now. So my friends across the street worry that with President Trump's peacemaking, yeah, please. Let's do something. This is going on for like 15 minutes.
There it is. Mike Wallace literally being booed off stage. The world thinks that we're a joke. But again, like with Israel, we kind of like that. Christians really like that. They're persecuting us for being Christian. No, they're persecuting you for murdering their children. They're persecuting you for using Jesus as some kind of moral license to commit genocide and ethnic cleansing. They're persecuting you because you cram your beliefs down their throat and you strip away their culture and their right to have their own beliefs. That's why they persecute you. And the Christians learned that from the Jews historically. They learned that victimhood complex, that victimhood mentality. We're being persecuted for being Christians. That must mean the Bible's true. No, you're being persecuted for being Christians because people are tired, they're sick, they're nauseated by you trying to convert them. They're nauseated by using Jesus and waving around crosses to murder children in foreign countries. They're sick of it. That's why people persecute you. You don't see a lot of people persecuting Buddhists. You don't see a lot of people persecuting people who just meditate and stick to their own little world and don't bother you. They live in their own little bubble. You don't see people persecuting them, but there's a lot of persecution against Jews and Christians. Why do you think that is? Because you just keep sticking your big Jew nose and your big cross in people's faces, and they're sick of it. That's why. But wait, there's more. Here is Pakistan. We got a translation of this, talking about the ceasefire and what it involves. And it involves Lebanon. And I'm debating if I should even show you some of the videos of Lebanon, because some of them are like graphic, what the Israelis are doing there currently.
Lebanon is a country of remarkable diversity, shaped by layers of civilization and a rich cultural and historical legacy. Its people have long shown resilience in the face of adversity, preserving a vibrant social fabric rooted in coexistence among communities and traditions. Lebanon needs a period of calm to pursue its objectives of peace and stability. The renewed escalation and hostilities are a matter of great concern. They threaten far more than infrastructure. They endanger civilian life and risk reversing the fragile political and security progress Lebanon had begun to make preceding the current crisis. In this context, allow me to make 4 points. First, Pakistan reiterates its full support for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Lebanon. We condemn in the strongest terms Israel's continued military aggression in southern Lebanon, which has resulted in the death of more than 400 civilians, including at least 83 children and 42 women, and over 600,000 people displaced. Sweeping illegal evacuation orders across large parts of southern Lebanon have deepened civilian suffering. The large-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure and the blatant disregard for international humanitarian law must cease immediately. Second, the use of force must remain the exclusive prerogative of the Lebanese state through its legitimate institutions. In this regard, the Lebanese armed forces play a central role, and Pakistan supports efforts to strengthen their capacity and operational effectiveness. Pakistan welcomes the efforts of the government of Lebanon to restore stability and strengthen state authority, including the cabinet decision of 2nd March to reinforce national security structures. We also note Lebanon's de-escalation initiatives, including the 4-point plan advanced by its leadership to restore calm and stability. Third, Pakistan strongly condemns attacks on UN peacekeepers serving with UNIFIL, who have been injured in Israeli strikes. Peacekeepers operating under the UN flag carry out a vital mandate authorized by the Council. Their safety and security must be guaranteed at all times. Fourth, Israeli military activities in southern Lebanon, including the continued presence of forces and the establishment of positions inside Lebanese territory, are illegal and unacceptable. These Israeli actions, which are in contravention of international law, are also undermining the efforts of the government of Lebanon to ensure peace and stability in the country. We call for Israel's immediate, full, and unconditional withdrawal from all occupied Lebanese territories. Sustainable calm requires the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701 and unwavering respect for Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity along the Blue Line. Mr. President, we echo the Secretary General's deep concern regarding the regional military escalation since 28th February, which has gravely undermined the November 2024 cessation of hostilities agreement. The situation in Lebanon cannot be viewed in isolation from this broader escalation across the Middle East. Heightened confrontation and unjustified attacks on several brotherly countries, which Pakistan has condemned, have gravely aggravated regional security and stability. At this critical juncture, dialogue and diplomacy must prevail over confrontation. De-escalation, restraint, and renewed diplomatic engagement are urgently required to prevent further deterioration of the regional security environment. Only through sustained political dialogue and respect for international law can the region move towards stability and peace. To conclude, Mr. President, Pakistan stands firmly with the government and people of Lebanon. The international community must take urgent action to prevent further escalation, alleviate human suffering, and support Lebanon's efforts to restore peace and stability across its territory. I thank you very much.
Based on Pakistan's position and Pakistan negotiating, Lebanon is part of the ceasefire. That's according to Shabazz Sharif, the guy that negotiated the ceasefire. But J.D. Vance says that's not true. It's not part of the ceasefire.
First of all, I actually think, and there's a lot of bad faith negotiation and a lot of bad faith, propaganda going on. I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arabs.
Well, that's what they said, but the negotiators that actually got the ceasefire said something different, apparently. Remember I played you the clip a little bit earlier on the show comparing the downed soldiers to Jesus? Here's an interesting story for you. Politico reported this. Trump threatens to jail journalists who reported on crew rescue in Iran if they don't reveal source. Did you hear about this story? I thought this was the kind of stuff that they did in Iran. I thought this is the kind of stuff they did it in some kind of backwards Muslim country. They put people in jail for reporting. What? And I'm also pretty sure that it turns out that the people that broke this story were quite literally Jewish. So Trump walked back the whole, I'm going to put you in jail. So you're Jewish, you get away with things that it's not really a crime to report things. But anyway, you, I think, get the point. All right, so tstradio.info, that's the website. rdgable@yahoo.com is the email. Please buy me a coffee. Please support us via Cash App. Please listen to the free archive. Many of you already are doing that, and that is what keeps us on air primarily. If you want to get rid of the advertisements throughout the show, you don't hear those on YouTube, of course, but if you want to get rid of the advertisements throughout the show, which you don't hear in the subscription archive, you can subscribe to the subscription archive on our website. At some point, we'll have a new website. It'll actually look modern. And we have yearly, monthly, weekly, and lifetime subscriptions. They're actually relatively cheap. You get access to the show archive, scroll back through, listen to all the old shows. tstradio.info. And you can listen to a radio show that has been really at the forefront of a lot of, I wouldn't say breaking news, but a lot of breaking stories and from an occult perspective. $50 for the whole year if you'd like to support the show. tstradio.info. That's tstradio.info. Now, if all goes well, we have a guest coming up in the third hour tonight. We have Chris Michaels of The Chris Michaels Show. I am going to bring him on here in about 10 minutes. I think that is a healthy amount of time to do this. Some of you might be new to this, but I am going to plug the StreamYard link into the chat room right now. And if you want to call in and give me your perspective on the show, jump on the line. It should be pretty easy to jump onto the call. Just click the link, and it should bring you right into the call, or it might open up another browser. So go ahead and click that link. I'll post it in the chat a few times. I know it usually takes a few minutes for people to see it, so maybe we can squeeze one or two calls in. Click on that link. Don't be afraid. Let me know what you think. If you do call in, make sure that you have your camera turned off, and also make sure that you let me know where you are, where you're calling from, and what your name is. And I'll bring you right on, get your comments, and we'll do it fast because we have very little time before our guest, Chris Michaels, comes on the show tonight. I also just read that the United States military registration for U.S. military draft begins in December. Automatic draft registration for U.S. military draft begins in December, and that'll include the 42-year-olds. Now you can be 42-year-old, and remember that was announced the same day that Charlie Kirk's mentor was killed, the 20th of March. All right, so we do have a couple of calls here, I think, so far. I'll ask you to please turn off your camera, and then I will bring you on. All righty. Thank you so much for doing that. Let's go ahead and go to, well, we'll see here first. Who am I speaking with, and where are you calling from?
My name is Cedar Brick, and I am calling from Arkansas.
Howdy, Cedar, in Arkansas. I've seen you in the chat before. Thanks for joining us. What are your thoughts real quick?
Man, I always send you emails. I'll send you like just a really bland title, and then the body of it is usually kind of bland because I know you're kind of a busy guy. You probably have a lot to sift through. And I sent you a pretty interesting one. The last one I sent, man, give me a second.
You sent me an email relating to Iran or relating to the ceasefire or something to that effect.
Man, a lot of that stuff I feel like is kind of really there's a whole lot of stuff to gain from it. If you're a company, I would say country. I almost said company. Whenever all this stuff is going on, and the whole ceasefire thing, and Israel still bombing Lebanon and stuff, and everybody's like, well, is that going to be breaching the ceasefire? And it's not. And then a whole bunch of people spreading like just fake news whenever it doesn't need to be there. Let's just get this thing done and over with.
I would like to see that happen, Cedar, but unfortunately, I don't think that's how it's going to play out. People will be ecstatic that we got peace, and then it's not peace, and then we won't talk about how it's not peace, just like with Gaza, and we'll go on a year later saying the president still got peace, and you wake up this morning and there's no peace, and it's just the same story like in Gaza. It's the same story it's never going to change. It's going to be the same thing until there's something dramatic that happens, I think, as I was saying earlier. I want it to stop too, but it's just unrealistic to think that's going to happen.
What are your thoughts on, so we have these podcasters online, these YouTubers or whatever you want to call them. They're sitting there and they're calling them, like this Mad King and whatnot, because he is saying these threats to Iran about bombing the civilization and stuff. And then after Iran, quote unquote, bends the knee or whatever, whatever you want to say, everybody says Taco Tuesday and basically like calls him a coward for chickening out. It's like, do you guys want this thing to end, or are you guys just fanning the flames for drama?
Well, see, that's actually a really good point. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I've thought about that a little bit today too. After I woke up, I saw people saying the same thing. So you wanted Iran to be obliterated? And I think some of the people that are pointing out that hypocrisy, they're making a good point. On the other hand, I think that they're making that point because they're trying to justify Trump's stance, and he's just playing hardball, and he's just playing the tough guy. I don't really think threatening to exterminate a civilization is playing the tough guy. I mean, let's say we said the same thing about the Jews in Israel. Let's just exterminate all the Jews in Israel, and we'll see how fast we have a world war. But in Iran, it's a different story to joke about that, right?
Yeah.
But you're right. Like I hope it stops. I want it to stop. But if it stops, the president doesn't get off. The president, the White House, the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth, you don't get off. You don't get to walk out and declare victory and be the peace president again. You did this. It's your fault. Don't gaslight me. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm really curious about how, whenever all of this is done and over with, and we have quote unquote peace, the straits open, there's not any type of drama. What happens after this? And I mean, I don't think that Israel is just going to put the brakes on. And I am retired from the military, and I don't think that there's a lot of people out there that want to continue pushing these war efforts whenever it's not for us. Our living expenses haven't come down. Nothing is changing for us. What is in the long? What's the long-term gain for the American folks out of all of this? You know what I'm saying? And like I said, I don't think that they're just going to stop. So I'm just curious to see, I guess, what comes next.
No, you're right. They're not going to stop. And in fact, I will thank you for your call. And then I will play this clip of Israel not stopping, Israel saying that they're not going to stop. They're ready to keep fighting. And that's what's driving this whole thing. Israel is the parasite. They're the weight. They're the anchor. They're what is responsible for this, period. And to your point about the U.S. and cost of living and all this, that's just the cost of doing business for the Israelis. They don't care about Americans. They don't even care about their own people. They don't care about the Jews in Iran that they wanted to exterminate too. They don't care. They have a goal, and they're looking to reach that goal by any and all means necessary. I appreciate your call, Cedar. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You have a good night. Bye-bye. All right, let's play that clip of Netanyahu, and then we will bring Chris Michaels onto the show. Also, if my good friend Joseph is listening, I hope Joseph calls in tonight, because I saw someone else in the chat mention this. I'll see if I can scroll up and, here it is. Eric Schrock in the chat said, my instinct was he was playing insider trading again. And that is a gigantic piece of this. And the Iranians know that, the manipulation of the markets, the threats on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then the calming of the markets on Monday. And that's a big part of this. I don't know as much about that, but I know my friend Joseph knows a substantial amount of about that subject. So if Joseph, you're still listening, please give us a call tonight. Let's play Netanyahu. Let's see what Bibi had to say about Lebanon. Just total disregard for human life. This guy, actually, I don't even want to say what I would do to this guy, what I think should be done to this guy. It's like, it's satanic is what I think should be done to him. It's like really evil.
Israel is stronger than ever. This is the bottom line of this campaign up until now. Let me say, there are still additional objectives for us to achieve, and we will achieve them either by agreement or by resumption of the fighting. We are ready to resume the fighting at any moment. Our finger is on the trigger. As you know, 2-week ceasefire has been announced between the U.S. and Iran. No, we were not surprised in the last moment, and I want to emphasize, this is not the end of the war. This is a step in order to achieve all the objectives.
So it's not the end of the war. It's a step to achieve all of our objectives. Now, see, that's normally stuff I say, and people say, you're crazy. Trump's a genius. You're crazy. That's anti-Semitic. And then Netanyahu just says that's what's actually happening. That's the real president of the United States, very obviously, clearly. And we'll just say, for the sake of me not sounding too vague, I think Netanyahu would make a lovely lampshade. I think he'd make a nice bar of soap. And that would be putting it lightly. And if you think that's evil, well, okay. You think that's wrong? Okay. You think I should not be able to talk like that in a civil society? Okay. Well, let me show you what this psychopath is doing to civilians in Lebanon. Here are just a couple wonderful videos. Mass bombardment of civilians. Here's one from this morning. The peace agreement, peace president. Oh my, look how much peace. Just pieces of debris flying from missiles that you paid for. Look at that. Look at all that peace flying up in the air. Body parts and papers, and look at those explosions. And so yes, Netanyahu would make a lovely, lovely lampshade. He would make a lovely bar of soap. It would probably smell like sulfur, so I don't know if I want to use it, but I think you get the point. tstradio.info, rdgable@yahoo.com. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight, for listening to The Secret Teachings. I know our audience has like quadrupled because of the coverage of this type of content over the last year and change. It's quadrupled in the last 2 months. I want to reiterate that I'm not a prophet. I don't predict the future, but I have studied a lot of theology, a lot of mythology, and I'm also very interested in learning about what the people making these decisions believe in, like what their religious convictions are, because I'm pretty sure that's going to drive their decision making. And you just heard Netanyahu there very clearly put it out in the open. That's how I know things, because they openly say it, and I'm not held back by political, religious convictions. Another guy that I know is not held back by those types of convictions is Chris Michaels of The Chris Michaels Show. I will have his link under the show description, because if you type in Chris Michaels, you get, I think, at least one or two other Chris Michaels. But let's bring Chris Michaels from The Chris Michaels Show on to The Secret Teachings tonight, and we'll also have call-ins in a little bit, so you can call in and talk with us and give your opinions. I'll stick the link back in the chat once more. Let's go to Chris Michaels. Chris, thanks for joining us on the show tonight. I really appreciate it. Live show tonight, and I think it's the first time we've done a live show together, so hopefully this is informative and fun. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, Ryan. Thanks for having me back.
You're very welcome. I don't know what you heard about my show. You heard some incendiary comments there that I made, but what is your take on maybe what you heard, and also the fake peace, once again, like in Gaza, but this time in Iraq?
Well, from what I heard so far, or what I'm reading between the lines, is that it appears as though there is some kind of fifth column element, a coup faction within Iran. And that's what we're seeing here, because a lot of this does not make any sense. From what I was reading in foreign news organizations, is that Iran, even though it was taking a beating, it was still holding the upper hand in a lot of ways. It basically drummed the United States out of the Middle East for the most part, especially with its bases in the Gulf states. And then all of a sudden we get this ceasefire. Now, why I say there could be some kind of fifth column in there is because we saw that last night there was this 10-point peace plan that was accepted, and Donald Trump said, we accept this peace plan coming from Iran. And then everything stopped. And then today we see that it is tossed into the trash bin. Then we hear from the Trump administration that, well, this wasn't the peace plan that we spoke about last night. They changed things. and we just can't abide by this. So what happened? What likely happened is that you had two factions in Iran. You had the faction that is part of the legitimate government and the IRGC, which is the ones that we've been watching over the past month. And then you've got this fifth column that Trump is really talking to. And this fifth column is the one that Trump has always been talking to and is the one that Trump wanted to install through a color revolution. So what Trump did, I think, was he was able to make these claims that he was speaking to Iran and negotiating with Iran. He puts this threat out there that he's going to level everything and bring it back to the Stone Age by 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then all of a sudden we have this ceasefire. The Trump administration is now saying that, oh, we have this 10-point plan, right? Well, they likely accepted two sets of negotiations, one from the legitimate government of Iran and the other from the fifth column that Trump is trying to install. And so Trump and the Trump administration did a massive psyop. They said that Iran agreed to a ceasefire when probably they accepted the 10 negotiation points from the fifth column that he's trying to install, not the legitimate government of Iran, which enabled him to say, we've reached some kind of agreement to at least start the negotiations. And therefore, to have these negotiations, we must get a 10-day ceasefire. And so that's probably what you're looking at.
Now, that is a different interpretation than I had. It's a unique one. I have not heard anybody say anything like that. How would you respond to the reports? I mean, I suppose it's the Wall Street Journal, so what can you really take to be credible from them per se? But the Wall Street Journal had reported that Iran had no diplomatic ties with the U.S. They'd cut them off after some of the bombings. So
exactly. That's what I'm
saying. Who are they
saying.
talking to?
So exactly. The legitimate side of the government, right, is saying absolutely not. We're not going to talk to these people. But the fifth column that Trump is trying to install with the Shah's grandson that still lives in Nova.
Yes, it's his grandson, I believe. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
He lives in Nova in Northern Virginia. What else is in Northern Virginia? I don't know, a viper's den of CIA. Like, what do you think this guy is going to be aligned with? So more than likely, yes, the legitimate Iranian government is saying, no, we're not talking to the U.S. There's no reason to. But then Trump gets to claim he's speaking to Iranians because he's speaking to the fifth columnists that he wants to install, that he was not able to install during the quote-unquote protests by the agent provocateurs that occurred earlier this year and the legitimate Iranian government crushed. So by default, technically, Trump can say he's negotiating with Iranians. And I think it was still a massive psyop where even the Iranians themselves were caught off guard by all of a sudden, we have a ceasefire? The Israelis also claimed that they didn't have any warning, or at least most of the politicians in Israel. But then you kind of backtracked with the stories and they said, well, the higher ups knew that we were speaking to Trump about a ceasefire.
We also have the man who negotiated, one of the men who negotiated the so-called ceasefire, Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan, who had said that the ceasefire included Lebanon. And then you have J.D. Vance saying, no, we don't. It didn't include Lebanon. I mean, even if what you're saying in terms of there being a secondary kind of government that they're attempting to install and they're not talking to the current legitimate government, I don't understand why it can be that blatant or that obvious that clearly something's not aligned here. Like the vice president of the United States should have this information from the guy that negotiated the deal, especially if the vice president's supposedly anti-Iran war anyway. It just seems I said this earlier, Chris, it feels like there's a couple of things potentially happening here. These people have so much power, they just don't care. And they're just brazen and they just lie as a bodily function, and or they're desperate and so they're flailing, and or they're not used to. I mean, I think that this excuse isn't arguable anymore because it's 2026. But like in some regard, they're not really maybe used to there being so much availability of information. Like these are people that are a little bit older that maybe grew up when you had to have like 3 or 4 news channels that told you what was happening, maybe 4 or 5, and now everything you say is cataloged and put into a video archive somewhere instantaneously. Those are the 3 options that I provided earlier. I don't understand why things are this misrepresented or this inconsistent. I mean, this is like crazy inconsistency. This is verbatim 1984 Orwellian. It's just like the definition of gaslighting and blatant lies. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, think about it this way. Has there been one repercussion with the Epstein files? No, there hasn't been. There hasn't been any significant arrest or even an investigation, right? No investigation of any allegation.
No, that's not true. Joe Kent's under investigation.
What's that?
I said, no, that's not true. Joe Kent is under investigation. Oh, I'm sorry.
Actually, right?
That's because he released a letter saying Israel started the war, so he's under investigation. My bad.
Exactly. So, I mean, we're at a point in the Republic where these people feel haughty enough where they can just do whatever they want. And even if there is some level of exposure, there are no repercussions. So when it comes to the international stage, I mean, what else would you expect? Because we're talking about something that is enormous. We're talking about the division of the world, because that's what you're starting to see go on. They are dividing the world up into separate regions, like the North American Union. We heard that the European Union is now pursuing nuclear weapons, not obtaining them, but actually being able to build them. And Russia was very upset by that. You're starting to see the rise of the Gulf states because now Egypt, Turkey, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, they're starting to feel their oats, trying to quote unquote negotiate something. That I still think that those countries are against Iran. And you're also starting to see Israel vie for Middle Eastern dominance by making overtures that Turkey is next on the hit list. So with all of this, no, you're never going to get a straight answer, at least for another decade, until all the chips fall. Now, the reason why I think they could possibly be getting into some negotiation beyond what I said before is that I think that Iran probably has a decent amount of American soldiers, potentially special ops soldiers, from all of these little confrontations that we've heard rumors about, but the Trump admin is still stuck on 13 casualties, right? I think that they hold some kind of leverage in order to bring the United States to heel a little bit. I also think that there is Trump's ego getting involved, because with Trump's ego, he said that he was going to pursue any of the leakers about this whole F-15 rescue operation debacle, right? We heard about this, and he's going to pursue them, and he's going to go after them because we just can't have this kind of thing going on. And we find out that the people that leaked this story, at least according to Max Blumenthal, are actually Amit Siegel and Ariel Kahana, who are reporters that basically do whatever Netanyahu wants them to do. So how could Trump go after these guys? Because they're Israeli. So there's that leverage. And part of me would like to believe that Trump is engaging in some kind of ceasefire directly with Iran and basically saying, no, you just talk to us. Whatever you do with Iran, with Israel, whatever you do with the Gulf states, that's your own business. That's something that you folks have to resolve. But you negotiate this ceasefire just between the United States and Iran. The altruistic portion of me, that's where I lean, but I'm 70-30 on that one. Actually 30-70. 30, that's not 30%, that is true. 70% is not true. I would like to believe that.
I'd like to believe that too. It does make a little bit of sense if it's as a possibility. I was looking at that story about the journalists too, and I was thinking two things. One, it shows you how much influence Israelis or just simply the title Jewish has, where you can be Jewish and then suddenly you don't get sent to jail. Kind of like what Dershowitz said about Epstein. If he would have just come to me, I would have gotten him off for being a pedophile because he's Jewish. He actually said that. And the other thing I have an issue with is like, this is what we were told the Iranians do and the Russians do. They send journalists to jail. And yet here's the president saying, we're going to send you to jail unless you reveal your source. You can't report stuff like that. You revealed, sensitive information. Oh, wait, you're Jewish? Oh, that's okay then. No big deal. But that's the kind of stuff that we accuse the Iranians and the Russians of. It's not that they don't do those types of things. It's that we do too. In the same way that, Chris, I don't know how much you've talked about this or thought about it, but we accuse the Iranians of being these religious fanatics, which to a very large degree they are. I think it's relative also to some degree. Meanwhile, you have Paula White selling $1,000 blessings from the Bible. You have Paula White dancing up and down on the stage. If I walk on the White House grounds, it's holy ground. So I feel like that Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth comparing the pilot that was shot down to Jesus. I don't know if you heard that, compared him to Jesus. I feel like they're also religious fanatics, and we also send journalists to jail, and we also stomp out protests. I feel like it's not, at the very least, it's no different than what we accuse our enemies of.
Absolutely not. I mean, case in point, Julian Assange. Right?
Julian Assange, that's right. Julian Assange.
Look no further than that. Look no further on some level than Charlie Kirk. He was at least exposing some level of information, and that information could be strikingly uncomfortable for a lot of, rank and file MAGA supporters that are Christian Zionists. So, I mean, yeah. And I suspect that the only reason why Tucker is getting the flack that he's getting is because they can't pull another Charlie Kirk. Because how much have we seen with Mark Levin and Laura Loomer, Easter Island head native Laura Loomer, saying that, oh, Tucker Carlson, oh, this, that, and the other thing. I mean, enough. Why can't we call out Laura Loomer for being what she is? I mean, she should register with FARA for being a representative of Easter Island and also having a massive amount of alignment with Israel, indirectly or directly. I mean, it's absolutely atrocious that people like Mark Levin and Laura Loomer can basically say that every single Muslim should be questioned, should be rounded up, should be deported. And meanwhile, if you dare to make an argument along the same lines with their ethnic background, then, you're anti-Semitic. And then there's this separation between an average Jewish person and a Zionist, even though you listen to ADL's Greenblatt and he says you can't be a Zionist without being Jewish and you can't be Jewish without being a Zionist. I mean, so what is it, guys?
It's a good question.
Here we go. All right. Yeah.
Here's Laura Loomer's post. I read it earlier. The biggest mistake you can ever make is trusting the word of a Muslim. Muslims are taught to engage in taqiyya, the act of permissible lying. The funny thing is, to be fair to Jews and to be fair to the Talmud does teach that permissible lying is acceptable. And it's not so much that you can just lie to Gentiles, but that you can lie to preserve peace. That's what the Muslims teach. And to some extent, I think Christians probably embrace that, as well. It's not really unique. And yet, no, it must be just a Muslim thing. I mean, it's like a Mad Lib, though. I just replaced the word Muslim. The biggest mistake you can ever make is trusting the word of a Jew. Oh my God, you can't say that. Well, then why can she condemn 2 billion people? This is what Muslims do. It's what Jews do.
100%. It's ridiculous. Like, what's really tragic about this whole situation, especially about people like Mark Levin and Laura Loomer, is that they seem to have a direct line to Donald Trump. Because how many stories has Laura Loomer supposedly broken where Laura Loomer says, yes, I got this person fired. Yes, I got this person investigated. Yes, I got the offspring of some Iranian elite to be kicked out of the country, even though she's here on a legal visa. I mean, What is this? I mean, this is Kristallnacht all
Yeah,
over
yeah.
again.
Well,
It's
so
bizarre behavior.
I am genuinely, how should I put this? I'm genuinely,
Revolted?
yes, I'm genuinely afraid of what's going to happen, not next, but like what's going to unfold from what we're witnessing, at least in the last 6 months to a year. And I think that we're on the verge of a Kristallnacht. You know, historically, if you read about Kristallnacht, if you read about, you know, the Night of Broken Glass, it wasn't because the Germans woke up one day and decided to smash Jewish shops because they just thought, I hate Jews. They did that because there were massive boycotts in the United States, as I'm sure you know. I talked about this on my show earlier this week. In fact, encyclopedias, the Holocaust, and others admit that, or not acknowledge, not admit, acknowledge that the 27th of March was one of the first official days, but they had protests going back to I think it was like March 5th. So the whole month of March 1933 was filled with Jewish groups organizing anti-German protests and boycotts in the United States. The Germans held a boycott on April 1st, which the last time I checked, April comes after March. And yet it's been painted as the Jews were just targeted for being Jews. It's like, no. They were targeted, and the people protested against those Jewish shops because the Jews had done that to German shops and businesses and had rallied America behind this anti-German sentiment in March of 1933. And so understanding that historically paints a different picture of what's happening today, because you can see the conditions that are building. And Randy Fine in Florida, who probably works pretty close with Laura Loomer, Randy Fine in Florida, he has even said that openly. He's even alluded to that, I should say. He said, we might get kicked out of America. I don't know if you heard him say that. He's like, the Jews have been kicked out of every place we've ever lived. It's never our fault. And our time could come to an end in the United States. They're already aware of this. People like Randy Fine, they know that they're unpopular. They know that the public knows that they're traitors and foreign agents, like Loomer is. They know that they're unpopular and that there's an act of rebellion that's inevitable. And how that unfolds, it's going to unfold in one extreme or the other. They're either going to solidify their control, or there's going to be a natural resistance against it, a resistance that I'm not going to want to be a part of because it's going to be vile, hateful, violent, and not something I want to participate in. But I think it's the natural byproduct of, you can only push somebody so far. You can only, it's like Dumb and Dumber. He's like, you want to hear the most annoying sound in the world? And after a while, you just want to punch the guy. And that's kind of how I feel about Randy Fine and the rest of these people. Crystal Night is inevitable. It's just like Judgment Day is inevitable. Something like that is going to happen again, because it's happened hundreds and hundreds of times before. You push people to the brink, and that's how they're going to react. I really do think that, and that unnerves me, because I don't want the opposite form of tyranny to take power either. And I think that's one very highly likely potential option to combating all of this. I mean, that's just my historical perspective.
Well, there are a lot of people that are saying essentially that not only with the Zionist elite in America, but just the hyper elites themselves, regardless of background, that the only way to stop this is to have another French Revolution style event. Now, that's not coming from me. That's coming from people like Dr. Joseph Farrell and otherwise, right? So it's hard to imagine how we do not have some domestic confrontation throughout all of this. And I think they're going to try to head this off at the pass through AI and using anti-Semitism as the excuse to get rid of the First Amendment. So I think that's their last hope, right? It's not necessarily about Judaism. It's about freedom of speech. And you see more and more of this throughout the world. I mean, Mexico is trying to push through legislation that says if you want to use your cell phone, you have to put your biometrics on file with the Mexican government. I mean, that means that they know everything that you do on your phone, right?
You know, that's, my wife and I were thinking about coming back to the US this year to visit, and she's only been there one time, and she wanted to visit some people and go to Florida, where I'm from. And I just read, I thought it was going to be couple of years from now. But I just read that when we come to the U.S. this year, there is a policy in place that I don't know if I do because I'm still a U.S. citizen technically, but she'll have to submit to the U.S. government 5 years of her social media history. Did you read about this? This is
Really?
a real, this is the new policy. You have to
goodness.
submit 5 years of social media history. I don't know how, I guess just give them access to it. And they go through, they have an AI go through 5 years social media history to travel to the United States. And of course, that's not because they're looking for terrorists. It's because they're looking for people that criticize Israel. That's at least part of it. It's, I'm assuming that it's the majority of countries. I know that it includes Japan. Here, I'll pull up the CNBC article that I had saved. I know that it includes Japan because that's where I'm living. But here's CNBC: U.S. to mandate checks of some tourists' social media history from past 5 years, and it does include Japan, which is just like one of the most ridiculous countries to include. What terrorists come from Japan? But we know what Japan does have. Japan has a lot of anti-war sentiment and still has a lot of like World War II era. They don't care about Jews here. I can tell you that. So I'm guessing that's why they stuck Japan on the list. But there's 40 something countries that are involved. And well, you don't get to enter the US if you have the wrong social media.
Gosh. Or you get monitored, right? Do you have to submit that preliminarily or?
I am uncertain of how it's going to work, but I just know that they're going to have to, they're implementing it, and we'd have to submit it to be able to travel to the US, or at least she would. I don't know if I would.
That's crazy. I mean, I didn't know, but that sounds fairly draconian. You sure you want to come here for that?
It might be my last trip. I was even joking with her. I said, we forget about the marriage visas. We might just have to do I might have to do political asylum.
I mean, that's crazy. But unfortunately, that's the way this is going to go. Because another push behind all of this, especially with the Iranian war, is to create a global system of governance. And you saw a lot of South Asian nations, including the EU, and they are saying that we need to watch out for our consumption of fuel and energy. The Europeans don't have to watch out for their consumption of energy. All they have to do is remove their heads from their rectums and buy Russian oil again or Russian energy again, right? That's all you have to do for them. But through that, they're trying to implement another lockdown style event like we saw during COVID, where, everybody needs to stay home. We need to work less days. If you're going to travel anywhere, it's got to be through public transportation and work from home whenever you can. I mean, this is going to be not a vaccine passport where you had to put your digital ID on file with your medical records to prove that you could walk around town without a mask. This is going to be, how many carbon credits are you going to use? I mean, I think that's the end goal with all of this. They're not going to let this kind of situation go to waste. So, I mean, where are we?
If anything, what's happening in Iran, and Lindsey Graham had even said this, and I believe I still have the clip of that pulled up as well I could play. I haven't done so yet. Lindsey Graham had said that what's happening is basically an issue over the petrodollar. It's basically an energy issue, at least for him and from his perspective and the people that he works for. It's an energy issue, which of course it is. And I did a show in this called, it's in the archive the last few weeks. It was maybe the water war or something about water. The World Economic Forum and other international groups have said that, including the guy that runs the World Economic Forum now, who used to be the CEO of Nestle, says that water is going to be the next resource war, right? And what was the American government thinking about bombing, and has actually engaged in already, targeting desalination plants, along with power plants, and of course, oil infrastructure. And Israel has been instrumental in targeting oil infrastructure even without the U.S. So if you're hitting oil, you're getting rid of desalination plants, and especially in a place like Iran that already has water shortages, which, by the way, they also blame on the Israelis and say the Israelis have been engineering the weather. So they've created this propaganda about Israeli space lasers, and it's like, well, you can joke about that, but they do have the ability to cloud seed. Dubai does it. They're doing it right now. So I'm pretty sure the Israelis have been cutting off the water supply to Iran. I wonder why they don't like them. But anyway, the point is water, oil, electricity, energy. That's not like in economics is a big part of it. There's the holy war angle to all of this as well. But basic economics and energy is a gigantic part of it, which is I wanted to pause here just for a moment, and I wanted to go to a call we have from a friend of mine, Joseph. He's been following this pretty closely. He's got a background in economics, and I had sent him this article the other day from, I believe I still have it here. It was another CNBC article. I'll ask you first, Chris, did you realize that what Trump was saying on Fridays and then Saturday, Sunday, and then Mondays, he would say something more peaceful, and then the markets would fluctuate in the positive direction of what he was saying? The Iranians have pointed this out. Others have pointed this out. Mainstream media has picked this up. Volume in stock and oil futures surged minutes before Trump's market turning post. So it's a lot of market manipulation. Have you paid attention to that? Do you know anything about that? And then we're going to go to Joseph.
Of course. Yes, he does that all the time. Because if he did not do that, then the markets would be a lot more turbulent than what they currently are. And have you noticed all the poly market bets?
I don't keep up with that. What are the bets of?
Oh my God. There's clearly somebody within the Trump administration betting massive amounts of money for...
Is it Nancy Pelosi?
You know what? This person seems to be even better than Miss Pelosi. So people make the conjecture that it could be Baron Trump. I mean, sure, I can buy it just as much as anybody else, right? But there is definitely some betting going on in there, and they're placing these bets like 15 minutes before Trump makes an announcement. I mean, what kind of prognosticator are you? Right?
Let's go to Joseph. Joseph is a good friend of mine. I think he's been on the show before as a guest. Joseph, what do you make of all of this? I know you have a background in economics, and you were telling me some stuff that I was unaware of. You got Chris Michaels with us as well. And Joseph, are you there? Oh, maybe he dropped off. I'll see if I can get Joseph to call back in, and if not, we'll proceed anyway. But it sounds like this is illegal. It sounds like this would be really illegal, but I guess if Trump's people do it, it's okay. That's how it works.
You have people like Jared Kushner that doesn't have an official role in the Trump administration, right?
Oh, it could be Jared Kushner. Oh, you mean the same guy negotiating the fake peace deals in Gaza and Iran over and over and over again?
Why any Iranian would negotiate with Jared Kushner or Witkoff is beyond me.
I see the same thing, Chris. Shame on the Iranians for negotiating with Jared Kushner. Shame.
That's why I'm saying that's why the only thing that makes sense is that if they're claiming they're negotiating with the Iranians, but in fact they're negotiating with Iranians that are sympathetic towards the Israeli and American cause. That way they can technically claim they're talking to the Iranians, right? That's the only thing that makes sense.
I mean, if you're talking to, or you're like Trump's talking to Jared Kushner and taking his word for the truth, assuming it's like the truth. I feel like the president's already in the past said that Kushner has all this power, but he hasn't done anything to restrain him. Former White House officials have said that Kushner would just walk into meetings and take over the meeting as if he was the president. What's that?
Sachet. Have you ever seen Mr. Kushner walk?
Sachet, that is...
Yeah, he sachets into a room on a cloud of glitter.
Yeah.
And unfurled rainbows. I mean, this guy is so airy and floaty when he walks into a room. I mean, it's quite sad. Could you imagine that if you're an Iranian? See this guy waft into a room.
Well, don't they throw them off buildings?
Oh yes, of course. They take him by the seat of the pants and the collar, and they give him a good heave ho off of a 5th-story building. Now, what's also interesting is, remember before the last round of negotiations with Iran, just before they started to go sideways, the Iranians said that they admitted that they had nuclear material, but it wasn't
like
weapons.
uranium, right?
Right, uranium, but it wasn't weapons grade. And when they mentioned this, you had Kushner and Witkoff stare at them, mouth agape. It's not because they were saying, oh, yes, we finally have admission that the Iranians have nuclear material. No, it's because they didn't know what the Iranians were talking about. And so the Iranians had to school them on what enrichment was and what can and cannot be enriched. So now you're going to send these two mental midgets to negotiate again? What are you talking about? This is so foolish. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And Witkoff's the same fool who's been negotiating, quote unquote, negotiating over Ukraine. And nothing there has changed the last time I checked. No peace has come out of that. So we send the same guy who's failed to achieve peace in Ukraine to solve an even more complex issue that has yet to be resolved. And then after numerous negotiation attempts, nothing gets resolved, and they keep putting the same guy into the negotiator's chair. Clearly, I mean, if these two people were Muslims, people would say we can't trust these Muslims to negotiate. But since they're Jews, it's okay. And considering that not just that they're Jews, but that Jared Kushner has explicitly stated his beliefs and his goals for Israel, greater Israel, and luxury resort properties in Gaza, why anybody would trust, like why the American public would just, knowing that, would assume that, oh, well, we can trust him. We can trust what Trump, we can trust Trump. Why anybody would trust what Jared Kushner has to say in a negotiators meeting? He just says whatever he has motivation. He has a bias to obtain a certain outcome. And even if he was legitimately talking to the Iranians and trying to get an agreement, it's only going to be on his own terms, on Israel's terms. It's not going to be on the U.S.'s terms. They don't care what happens to the U.S. or our bases or our soldiers or any. They lied to us about. The president told us, based on Israeli, what was just a lie, but Israeli intel, they don't even have the ability to shoot our planes down. That was the intel we got from the Israelis. They can't shoot our planes down. And then we fly planes in, they shoot them down. I don't know how they did that, because the Israelis told us they had no capability to do that, which is just stupid, because everybody knows the Iranians have the capability to do that. So it's just lie after lie after lie. Why would you send someone to negotiate? I'm just so sick of it. It's so naked.
Or the fact that I didn't even know this until a couple of weeks ago. The fact that the Kushner family used to allow Netanyahu to stay with them when Jared Kushner was a child.
You told me this, yes. So,
and like Jared Kushner used to have to stay off in the basement while the Netanyahu family would, camp out in Jared Kushner's bedroom. So what do you expect from all of this? Right?
So Jared Kushner's basically, I mean, he's like
he's a stepson. I mean, for all intents and purposes, he's a stepson. It's the only way to look at it. He's part family.
I don't know what we do about this as Americans. Is there anything we can do?
It's beyond me, not with this administration. Hey, there's the official program observer up top. I don't know if you can see that.
I see that. I thought that there was something on your screen for a second.
No. That is Chi-Chi, the parakeet. She likes to. There you go. There she is. So the problem with all of this is that
I'm a big fan of birds. I think that bird could probably negotiate better than Kushner.
Oh, she's 3 ounces of feathers and she can fill up a room like she's trying to do now. So normally this is not the case, but we have a very enthusiastic program observer in the form of Chi-Chi.
That's fine. I've never had a bird as a listener before. That's great.
Oh, she's fantastic. So I don't know if there's a way out of this, because you have AIPAC. Unless you can somehow force AIPAC And now these offshoots of AIPAC, because people realize, especially the Democrats and the Democrat base, that AIPAC is funding all of this, they're now breaking apart the funding. So you've got things like J Street or whatever it's called, right? You have different innocuously named PACs
Because
that are
AIPAC
essentially
has been thoroughly exposed, so now breaking off into smaller little groups.
exactly. So unless you somehow tackle that money issue, then you're just going to have the same thing over and over again. Or you get some kind of president that just doesn't care. A second term president or a president that is only allowed to have one term or agrees to one term, right? And it's got to be an engineered event because you don't get to become president unless you're chosen. So you have to have somebody with a lot of fortitude to go in there and say, look, enough is enough. I would like to see legislation passed that says you cannot be a dual citizen in the president's cabinet, and nor can your spouse. And I don't care what the dual citizenship is. It could be Israel, it could be Turkey, it could be Scotland, doesn't matter.
You know what's funny about some of the FAR registrations, because there are some Israeli agents or some Jewish agents that register with FARA, including Show Faith Works and others. If you actually go read them, I went and read some of the filings of what these people are registering for, like what they're going to be doing with this influence. And if you read, people will make AIPAC and others will make the argument, well, other people lobby the U.S. government, the Ugandans and Japanese. But if you read, I read what the Japanese lobbied for. They lobbied for fishing rights and recognition of like really basic things.
And
You read, maybe whaling. If you watch that South Park episode where the Japanese kill the dolphins, dolphin. Yeah. Or Uganda lobbies for like human rights recognitions or something like that. But then in Israel's case, like every Israeli agent that registers with FARA, under FARA, it's always like their intent is to change U.S. laws to alter what is considered acceptable speech. It's different than what the Japanese or Africans lobby for. And that's the big issue. And that's just the people that register. That's not the people that are getting away with not registering, including people like Laura Loomer and including people like Brad. How do you pronounce the guy's name? Is it Brad Parscale? You know who Brad Parscale is?
Yes, sounds familiar.
I think it's Praskell. Anyway, this is Trump, Brad Parscale. This is Trump's former campaign manager.
Yes.
He is now registered as a foreign agent, and he took over Salem Media Group, which oversees both the radio and the podcasting of people from Larry Elder to Josh Hammer to Laura Trump to Dinesh D'Souza. In other words, all the people that are heavily involved in Turning Point USA, many of them directly involved influencers. And so you have an Israeli agent who's registered as such, running all the podcast and radio shows for Turning Point USA, which was an organization that would have driven people away from war in Iran and would have driven people to have families and kids and not watch porn. And now it's driving people to war in Iran. And so it's convenient that Charlie Kirk died after having made the realization and made the statements that the Jewish billionaires fulfill all the same stereotypes, the nasty stereotypes. Liberal Jews are behind all the things that are the problems in the United States. And then his mentor also happens to die on March 20th in a freak pickleball accident, the same day the U.S. Army updates their draft requirements, which allows for 42-year-olds now to join the draft to go fight for Israel. So I find it to be really open. And I think that because it's so open now, and there's still pushback, and you still get called an anti-Semite for talking about this stuff, Chris. But ultimately, I think now that the public sees this, to my question of what I asked you about what do we do about this, I think that the natural evolution of this is, which is why I don't want anything to do with it. The natural evolution of this is like any crowd of people that gets worked up. You might get a stampede, you get a riot. Even if people individually, you can talk to them, you can't talk to a mob. And I think that the country's essentially becoming mobbed, and the public is going to react and respond in a way that is equivalent to everything we've seen throughout history. I keep telling people we are in February, March of 1933. And no, I don't mean that in relation to Nazis and the Holocaust, which of course was 10 years later. People misunderstand that. I just mean like we're at the point where people have realized who's behind the porn, the open borders, the degenerate behavior in media and entertainment. And the public, the Germans, are just done. And I think the American public are at that point. And here's Randy Fine openly acknowledging that and saying that they're going to have to watch out because they're probably going to could be potentially removed from the United States.
I am here to fight, and we are in a time where we need fighters. We need people to go out and fight. We need people who are not going to be afraid, because if we stay silent in the face of what is coming, not only on the left, but on our own side as well, our time in this country could come to an end as well. Jews have been kicked out of every country we've ever lived, and it's never been our own fault. And there are people who would like to do the same to us here. And unfortunately, some of them are in our own party.
That's the thing that unifies the country, Chris. Both Republicans and Democrats realize who's responsible for all this, and there's a rebellion against it. But it's never their fault. I think that the extremism is the natural reaction, the way that all of this gets fixed. It's not good for anybody.
No, it's never a pretty sight. I mean, let's be honest. Nobody wants some kind of French Revolution. Nobody wants the guillotines or anything like that, right? We just technically want to live alone. The American public is normally very isolationist. It's been that way for World War I, World War II. It's still that way now. And it's tragic that the older generations, like I dare say the boomers, they still have this glorious mindset where no matter what America does, it's always for some altruistic purpose. And so we must defend poor little Israel or little Saudi Arabia or Kuwait. And there's got to be some moral compass heading that the United States has to go into. And they're completely brainwashed, because I've spoken to them recently over the past week or so, 2 weeks, about what's going on in the Middle East. And they're saying, yeah, we got to get them, and Iran is completely demolished, and we got to nuke them. Really? You got to nuke people? I mean, is that what we got to do? So I think that in order to completely revamp this, there needs to be a true grassroots effort. And you brought up lobbying efforts and how the AIPAC crowd says, well, we're just a minuscule portion of the population. So, I mean, if you're so upset about our policies, then why can't you outfund us? There's got to be some kind of unification going on, where, think about it this way. If you are part of the American Party, or if you're part of the American Republic and you want to see a positive outcome, $1 from every American citizen, that's $350 million. Now, could be a drop in the bucket for a federal election, but for a state or a local election, that could mean something. So I think, honestly, if we're going to see true change, we have to start at a state level or a local level, because that's where you get these governors that have very, very weird, bizarre powers if they choose to exercise them, like we saw during COVID. And otherwise, the federal government is just going to run roughshod over all of us.
I agree with you, and I was adding sheriffs as well.
Yes, sheriffs.
Although Governor DeSantis exercised that weird power, and now he's going to Israel to sign laws for the state of Florida, which is weird. But I agree with you. That's kind of the idea of how America should do things, the right way. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think it's going to be, we advocate on average for the extermination of an entire culture, civilization, or we are going to kick the Jews out of the United States. I really think that we're at a crossroads, and I'm not advocating for either one of those things, frankly. I'm just saying that I think that those are the two outcomes, because the public is, for the most part, totally oblivious. Very few people are like you, Chris. Very few people are like our listeners, unfortunately.
Although we are cut above the rest.
We are making inroads with, I think, maybe the general public. More people are realizing and becoming aware. But that's also the danger too, because I'll use like Stu Peters as an example. I've been talking about this stuff for 16 years. Stu Peters just figured it out like a year ago, 2 years ago. He was selling like a chiropractor and literally like snake venom in the water for COVID, causing COVID. And now he's like on board, and he's a number one anti-Semite. It's like, well, they're using Stu Peters because he sounds like just a bigoted asshole. And that benefits them because they can use him and people that agree with him to shut down free speech. But also people like Stu Peters, and I'm not saying I necessarily have something against the guy per se. I'm just saying that people like Stu Peters become the face of all of this because they're controllable, they're malleable, they're emotional. And when people become aware of this stuff, that's usually what happens. They're like, well, wait a minute, hold on a second. So you're saying that Jews really do run the world. Oh my God, I'm going to become a neo-Nazi, as if that's supposed to mean something. And then that's the kind of radical extremist reaction you have to it. And that's the kind of thing that I'm worried about. Not that I'm worried about Nazis. I don't know what people even think that term means. I'm just worried that the radical extremist reaction, the over emotional reaction, is how the general public tends to react to everything. So I think that would be the reaction when people are met with this crossroads. Let's see if Joseph is back. Joseph, are you there with us?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. It's a little bit crackly. But what were you talking with me about on the chat before about the economic issue here in the markets?
Just about you referring to Trump basically manipulating the markets with basically over the weekend. I think I kind of broke up.
Hey Joseph, I'm sorry, buddy. You're breaking up really bad, like you had said. So it sounds like a robot. It's all crackly. I apologize. Okay. We'll have to get a better connection another time and have you come on the show and we can talk about it. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. That might be a StreamYard issue that happens sometimes when people connect on their phones. Anyway, I apologize for that. So we'll go back to Chris. We've got about 9 minutes left on the show tonight. I will give the microphone to you, and I'll let you have some additional comments and then some closing statements. Go ahead, Chris. Chris Michaels.
Okay. One point I would like to make takes us back to last week. Last week, when we heard about this F-15 going down, and we had this massive search and rescue going on. And then all of a sudden, we went from one F-15 going down to 11 other planes and aircraft also being destroyed in the same search and rescue effort. I'm of the opinion that this was more than likely some kind of raid to get nuclear material from Iran. And a lot of people also believe this same thing at this point. However, I will add this little wrinkle to the whole thing. What was going on at the same time? This raid that was falling apart and turning into a rescue operation for the rescue operation was occurring behind the scenes, and nobody knew about it in the public. What we did know in the public was Hegseth going on a purge, right? We saw all those generals being asked to resign. I think we were up to 24 different people that Hegseth said, get out of here if you can. Because Hegseth can't really do anything. I think it's got to be Trump that actually kicks them to the curb. My conjecture, despite the mainstream media saying that, oh, these people are so brave, they're standing up for the Republic and they're pushing back against Trump's invasion of Iran, is that these people signed off on that raid. They created the plans for this raid. They sold Hegseth and Trump this, or oversold this plan to Hegseth and Trump, and said, yes, we can go and get the nuclear material. All we need is the SEALs, the Delta Force, and we're ready to go, and air support. When Hegseth was doing that, this raid was going sideways in the background. We didn't know about it yet for another day or two. What would make sense to me is that not that these generals were pushing back against an Iranian invasion, is that these generals, in fact, signed off on the idea and supported it. And the mainstream media needs something to glom onto ahead of the midterm elections. So do not buy what we're being sold on Iran at all. It's just not there.
I had referenced that earlier as well, Chris, and I think I mentioned that on Tuesday's show. On top of that, that I also think that there was an attempt to obtain that material. There's an attempt to send in a large number of soldiers, an invasion force, whatever you want to call it, and they got their butts kicked. And so the U.S. is trying to save face. And in the process of doing that, we've also, as I played the clip many times, we've also compared the downed pilot to Jesus. I don't know if you heard that, but Pete Hegseth said that he was Jesus. Did you hear that clip?
It's embarrassing.
It's totally embarrassing. It's actually sacrilege and blasphemous, and I'm not even a Christian, so it's
it's absolute blasphemy.
There was also the report that Trump was dead over the weekend, and then according to Ed Krasenstein, the gay Jewish influencer who on video said that he's paid to sow discord, he's the one that spread the rumors that Trump was dead. And then magically Sunday morning, the White House says, actually, he's alive, like Jesus. It's embarrassing. It's really, really embarrassing. It's a real shame.
Let me ask you this question. Do you think this potential ceasefire is a way for the ending of Passover to be celebrated undisturbed and to give a little respite?
That's a good point. Yes, I do think that it has something to do with that. Yeah, and I think it's the eye of the storm.
Right. Because once Passover has been completed, then I think we're going to go right back to square one, because the air convoy going from the United States to Europe to the Middle East is still going. You even had Tom Cotton say that the Arkansas National Guard artillery unit, I think it's the 142nd or something like that, they're going over to the Middle East. He said that yesterday. Now, why would you send over an artillery unit to the Middle East if you're negotiating a ceasefire and getting ready to play nice with everyone once again?
No, they're getting ready for a larger invasion is what they're getting ready for.
A larger invasion, or partially attack the Straits of Hormuz and use artillery that's based in places like Kuwait or Iraq or Saudi Arabia so that they can potentially attack across the straits or attack some of Iran's islands in the straits. I mean, this is not going to go anywhere good. And I wouldn't put it past Trump or Israel to use low-yield Ripple technology nukes, because Trump also made this announcement when this ceasefire was done, and he said, we're going to help the Iranians clean up the nuclear dusts. What nuclear dust? Are you talking about depleted uranium like you destroyed Fallujah with in Iraq that created all kinds of birth defects? I mean, I could buy that, but I would also buy that they're using low-yield nukes.
I think the Israelis, if anybody's going to use something like that, they'll do it first if the U.S. won't do it. They're just waiting.
Right. And that's what everyone has been saying, is that, sure, the United States could say that they're not going to use nukes, but you can't contain Netanyahu.
Well, again, that's why I've said I don't have to advocate for it. I just think that the only solution to this, like a realistic solution, is you have to turn the bombers around and you have to level Israel. They're the greatest threat to world stability. They're the greatest threat to civilization as far as I'm concerned. And I mean it literally. That's the only solution to this. I'm not saying it's never going to happen. And I don't think that I'm not even an advocate for it. I'm just saying that that's the solution. The real enemy is Israel. The real enemy is the leadership of Israel and the religious fanatics that run that country. Iran is not the enemy. And there's no solution to this unless one of those extremes are going to happen. And I think Israel wants that, because they believe that God will protect them. That's part of their prophetic beliefs or the interpretations. And it's the same for the U.S. and Christians. Christians are like, they're persecuting us. Well, yeah, because you slaughtered their children for 75 years. So it's probably why they don't like you, even though Christians live pretty well in Iran along with Jews. So That's where the prophecy and the eschatology comes into play, as we've been discussing on this show. Anyway, Chris Michaels of the Chris Michaels Show, thank you for joining us tonight. Where can people find you? I know that there's other Chris Michaels, so how can they find your show?
Wow.
Exactly.
So if you can do some digging, you can find me on Spotify, The Chris Michaels Show. And if you want to find me on X, where the algorithm will allow you to ignore me to an elevated level, you can go and find me at the C. Michaels Show. C. Michaels Show, 2 S's between Michaels and Show. And I am there with my witticisms. Every day I post something on Spotify. So that's where the action is.
Well, I appreciate coming on the show, Chris, and I encourage all of you as listeners to go listen to Chris's show. It's a little bit shorter than this show, little snippets compared to the monster length of broadcasts we do. It's really nice because you get this like condensed version of. You don't have to hear me rambling for 3 hours. So go check out the Chris Michaels Show. And last but not least, since you're a movie guy, and we've touched on this a little bit, I just wanted to make the observation that during World War II, Americans had to go to movie theaters to learn about what was happening in Europe. We had to go get these film reels that we had to wait 2-3 weeks to come across the ocean. And they would put them in theaters, and people would go to the theaters and they would watch them. And this is what the evil Nazis are doing. It's really weird that in 2026, we're just about as blacked out about what's happening in Iran as we were back in the 1930s and 40s about what was happening in Europe. This is 2026, and we really don't, like, we almost have to go to the modern equivalent of a theater to find out what's happening. We have no idea what's going on in Iran.
You have to go to international sources, and even then, you've got to take it with a grain of salt. And the theater these days is social media.
It's indicative of things are not going the way that they're telling us.
Right.
Which is why we're not seeing what's happening. Because the last time I checked, it was good for ratings to show the Iraq War and all those operations on cable television. But that's when we were winning. Then I don't know if they want to show us these wars, because I don't think we're winning. I don't think Israel is winning either. I think they're being pummeled. Anyway, Chris Michaels, thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank everybody in the chat for joining us tonight. tstradio.info, rdgable@yahoo.com. Get a copy of my book, Protocols of Goyim, or Occult Arcana, among other copies of Liberty Shrugged, all at tstradio.info. You can also buy me a coffee, support us on Cash App, listen to the free archive. If you want to get rid of the advertisements, you can subscribe to the ad-free show. And as we go out here, we'll play another update here from Pete Hegseth about the bombing campaigns in Iran.
I'll tell you about the bombs. Nerd. You think Iran knows bombs? I mastered the bombs in 2004 at a frat house in Hoboken. Phase 1, the Jaeger bomb, German engineering. You take a shot of Jägermeister.